Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
Unexpected Emergencies by blueh. Luffy had been alone most of his short life, with no one to love and no one to rely on. This all changed, however, when the Whitebeard pirates stumble upon his lonely little island and take the 4-year-old boy under their wing. Who knew that the little rubber brat would become one of Oyaji's strongest commanders when he grew up? Ha! The Whitebeard pirates sure didn't. Huge shout out to all the warlords of this channel. You know who you are. Want to stand among legends? Join the channel membership and show your support. Adios!
This island is creepy, Thatch said with a smile, looking around at the overgrown trees and vines that seemed to want to latch onto the small group. Ace didn't quite agree, but kept his mouth shut anyways. I mean, I feel like I'm being watched. I hate that feeling, by the way. Especially if it's another pirate crew that thinks they can take us on. Do you know how annoying that is? The forest was dark and ominous, with fog licking at their feet and a chill reverberating through the air. The pirates could practically see the glowing red eyes that glared at them from the bushes. They hadn't seen any animals yet, much to Ace's disappointment, but that didn't mean that they couldn't sense their intimidating presence. In a way, the island reminded him of his old home on Dawn Island with Sabo. Sabo, Ace frowned and shook his head. He had his family, Sabo was gone, dead. He wouldn't have wanted Ace stuck on his death, anyways. Thatch, we don't need commentary at the moment, Yoi, Marco said, swatting at a plant that slithered onto the pathway. Marco huffed as another branch came alive and went for their ankles. Eventually Marco reached the level of fuck it and had his blue fire roared to life. It successfully scared away the bloodthirsty plants for a few seconds. We get that you need to talk all the time, but do you seriously need to talk all the time? Damn, Mark, that's cold, Thatch muttered, lowering his head and sticking out his bottom lip in a pout. He huffed and crossed his arms when he got no reaction, completely ignoring the rose vine that had grabbed his arm. Ace, you're with me on this, right? Come on, buddy. With you on what? Ace didn't even glance over his shoulder as he continued to burn the island's plants. The pirate took another step before his legs sunk into deep mud. With a low growl, Ace yanked his foot out and continued on his way with his boot now making a ski every time he stepped. The pirates or the creepiness? Another plant attacked them, but Ace just burned it, not really having a problem with their thorny friends because of his fire devil fruit. He huffed and muttered under his breath, the plants are annoying as hell. Everything, Thatch cried, practically throwing his hands up in the air. How come no one understood what he was trying to say? Everything he'd said was perfectly clear in his mind anyway. He didn't seem to think that whatever he said fell deaf to the other pirates' ears. I'll admit that the pirate crew challenging Pops is annoying, but this island isn't creepy. Ace kicked a giant leaf out of his path, blatantly ignoring the little voice in the back of his head that screamed, "You were one of those pirates," and rolled his eyes. Just really annoying. The plants are out to get me. I swear. Thatch jumped on Marco's back without warning, causing the blonde to stumble a little. Thatch looked around wildly as if he had seen something truly horrible. Which he hadn't, mind you, and dramatically cried, "Marco, save me, I'm too young to die." Marco said nothing, his only answer was grabbing the redhead's hands and flipping him into a mud pit that was in front of them. He didn't even spare a glance at the fallen commander as he walked over him like a bridge, getting more mud on Thatch's white shirt. Seeing Thatch's horrified face as he looked at his clothes, Ace couldn't help but let out the hysterical laughter that he'd been holding in. When he thought Marco wasn't looking, Ace shot Thatch a thumbs up. Without warning, the phoenix stopped walking and turned around to face Ace. Quit encouraging him. Thatch pushed himself off the wet ground with a groan, flicking all the excess dirt towards the incoming monster plants. His previously white outfit was now covered in a greenish-brown mixture that smelled awful. Even Ace had to take a step away from his friend. Marco, both of them complained, though Thatch's tone had a bit more of an edge to it as he pushed himself off the ground. One pair of puppy dog eyes and another glare met the phoenix's unwavering gaze. When Marco didn't budge, Ace sighed, giving up, and playfully shoved Thatch away from him as they continued on their impromptu adventure. Abruptly, Marco stopped, causing the two behind him to run into his back. "Oi, Marco, why'd you stop?" Ace asked, trying to get a better view. Instead of answering, Marco bent down to examine what looked like a leaf. Ace raised an eyebrow at Thatch, who just shrugged, flinging a little bit of mud from his hair. Ace was about to ask his question again when Marco straightened out and pointed to a spot just a little off the trail. "What is it?" Thatch asked as he bent down and went to look at the place Marco pointed to. Ace didn't see anything strange enough for Marco to show them until he noticed the dark red splotches behind a darker plant with 3 leaves. "Blood," Marco said simply, his expression remained impassive. "So," Ace said. Thatch pushed the leaves out of the way, revealing another large puddle. "An animal got hurt. Big deal." "No, Ace." Thatch's voice was barely above a hushed whisper. "Look." Ace furrowed his brows and pushed the leaves out of the way to get a better look. There was a lot of blood. His eyes traced the edge of the puddle before he spotted the small indents in the ground leading away from the blood. He sucked in a breath. "Are those footprints?" Marco said. "Human blood?" Thatch asked, glancing around them. "I thought this island was inhabited." "This island is uninhabited," Marco said, standing up again and resting his hands on his hips. "It's pretty much impossible for any humans to live here, or stay here for a period of time because of the flora and fauna. This is the first time I've been here myself, but I've heard about how the animals are strong enough to take out entire crews, yoi." Ace whistled, lips curving into a smirk. "Entire crews? That's pretty impressive. I'd like to explore this island more." The more he learned about this island, the more he was convinced that this was just a deadlier version of his home back in East Blue. Thatch snorted, then hit Ace on the head. The fire user glared at the cook, who in turn flicked dirt at his unsuspecting victim. "Of course you'd want to explore the island with deadly animals. Seriously, Ace, where's the common sense? Were you dropped on your head as a kid? Or is the whole thing going to your head?" Ace growled and snapped at the 4th Division commander. "That shitty geezer wasn't that nice to me, you know. Not to mention the fact that mountain bandits raised me. They don't like people very much, especially little kids who had a knack for making things explode." "Problem child," Thatch coughed into his fist, smirking as he watched Ace turn and give him a deadly glare that could probably scare off the plants. Marco was between the bickering pair in an instant, pushing them away from each other before they could start a fight. "Spar," Ace would say after everything was destroyed. The Phoenix looked at Thatch directly in the eyes and said, "I don't think what Ace said about exploring the island was such a bad idea, yoi. It might give us the chance to find this person." Ace nodded his head in agreement. "Fine." Thatch playfully threw his hands up in the air, grinning. The redhead bounded up from behind Ace and jabbed his finger in Ace's chest accusingly, leaving a circle of mud in the middle of his chest. "If I die, I'm blaming you, buddy." Ace shrugged nonchalantly and smirked. "Sure, but you'll be dead." "Stop." Marco's underlining threat reached both of the other commanders' ears and they backed down. Ace rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly, gave a small grin to Marco, and said, "Yeah, explore, right." Marco's eyebrow twitched, but he didn't comment and started walking past the plant that they'd been looking at, following the small trail of blood. Ace and Thatch glanced at each other, before snickering and racing to catch up with Marco. The trail led on for a while, longer than Ace thought possible. He didn't think they were going to find anyone at all. It seemed impossible at this point. How much blood had this person lost? They would at least be unconscious, if not dead. The sun was starting to set, and Ace really didn't want to have to try and find his way back to the Moby in the dark. He had a feeling that the plants weren't going to help them find a way out of this damn jungle. Ace was brought out of his musings by a roar that seemed to echo throughout the whole forest. Birds cried out as they fled their trees, taking to the sky. Ace felt himself shiver in excitement. Thatch stopped. "I think I hear one of those large animals. The blood trail leads towards whatever that was." Marco informed the other two, gesturing to the trail they'd been following. "We should go check it out, yoi." Both Ace and Thatch nodded eagerly, and followed the older man as they made their way through all the large plants and thick roots. They were all tense, expecting an attack at any moment. It wasn't a moment later when they all heard a high-pitched scream that vibrated in Ace's head even after it faded. Ace stopped dead in his tracks, looking around wildly, his hockey momentary forgotten. That was a person. Marco gave him a glance. What are we waiting for then, Yoi? All three commanders found themselves racing through the plants, covering the in small scratches and other injuries as the plants eagerly grabbed onto their clothes. When they found what they were supposedly looking for, it wasn't what they expected. The first thing they noticed was the tiger, which was, admittedly, hard to miss. Standing almost as tall as a middle-aged tree, its bright orange and black coat that glittered in the sunlight and glaring fangs made it the center of attention. From what Ace could tell, it had cornered a small animal that was backed against a tree. Then he remembered the scream and his eyes widened. No, not an animal. An animal couldn't make a sound like that. A person. Probably a child, given the size. The tiger snarled, and the kid backed further against the tree. Ace didn't know when or how, but he found his legs working on his own, running towards the giant tiger, ready to defend the kid and fry the tiger into a crisp. Oi! Ace yelled at the tiger, trying to get it to back away from the kid. Oi! You big furball! Over here! He probably looked like an idiot, waving his hands in the air like a monkey. The tiger turned snarled. Ace took a moment to glance at the kid that was huddled against the tree. He couldn't have been older than 4, and all he wore was a simple pair of shorts that were covered in dirt, scratches and blood. He had black hair and wide, innocent eyes that were terrified. In his hand, he was tightly clutching a silver pipe that was also covered in blood. He was skinny, way too skinny for anyone his age. Ace could see the boy's ribs even from where he was standing. The tiger snarled again as Ace brought his attention back to the current danger at hand. Ace couldn't help but gawk as the tiger loomed over him with drool dripping from its giant maw. Seriously, how could a tiger be this large? Hey, Thatch, Ace said, slowly and carefully as he noticed the man approach. How do you feel about cooking tiger? Thatch snorted, maybe if you don't fry it to a crisp first. Can't cook it if it's charred to the bone. Ace's grin turned feral. I'll try and be careful. The tiger glanced between the two of them, hesitating for a split second before pouncing. Ace was surprised to say the least, when the tiger didn't go for him, but for Thatch. Thatch easily dodged the incoming attack just as the tiger crushed the ground where Thatch would have been. Looks like he's your opponent now, Thatch. Ace laughed and used the distraction to spread towards the boy. He ignored Thatch's call of "damn it, Ace," from across clearing. Ace wasn't worried. Thatch is a cook. He knows how to deal with food. When Ace reached the boy, his eyes were shut, his breathing was shallow and the wound on the side was still bleeding heavily, but at least he was still alive. Ace gave a sigh of relief. The kid could probably still be saved with emergency medical care, which was back on the ship. And they were somewhat in the middle of a jungle, lost. Well shit. Sighing in frustration, the young adult ripped a piece of fabric from his shorts and gently pressed it onto the boy's bleeding wound. It wouldn't be life-threatening if it had been treated right away. A simple bandage would have done wonders. But it looks like the child had been running for his life since the wound had appeared. Ace guessed that the tiger gave the kid his wound. Those claws weren't for show. The child cried out in pain and surprise when he felt something touch him, his eyes snapping open. The minute he saw Ace, he whimpered and tried to move away, but Ace's hand on his shoulder held him firmly in place. Hey, Ace said quietly, trying not to scare the boy more than he already was. It's okay. We're not here to hurt you. We want to help. The boy's eyes were dropping slowly from the amount of blood he lost, but they still held the same fear and defiance that Ace had seen before. The boy made a small noise and tried to shift away. Ace snaked his hands under his small body and picked the boy up bridal style, holding him close to his exposed chest. The boy let out a gasp of surprise, opening his eyes once again to stare around him, but he didn't struggle like he had before. Instead, the boy buried his tiny head into Ace's shirtless chest, taking ragged breaths. Ace frowned and gently shook the boy, trying his best as he could not to hurt him. Oi, don't drop on us just yet. Stay awake a little longer. Okay? He didn't get a response, which he knew wasn't a very good sign. He glanced over his shoulder to see Thatch still fighting the tiger, but it was obvious who the winner was. It was more of a one-sided beat down on Thatch's part. The tiger could barely keep up. Marco was sitting in a nearby tree, watching everything but not intervening. His lazy eyes were darting all around the clearing, looking for other possible enemies. "Marco! Thatch!" Ace hollered. They had to get out of here. They could come back later and see where the boys' caretakers were. "We need to go, now." Marco simply nodded, jumping off the tree and dragging Thatch by the collar of his shirt. Thatch didn't seem very happy about this, but he didn't struggle, only crossing his arms like a 5-year-old and sticking out his tongue and letting his feet drag on the ground as the tiger chased them. "I was about to beat the shit out of it," Thatch complained. "Tiger meat is delicious if you cook it properly." "We didn't come here for a tiger," Marco said firmly, finally catching up to Ace. He glanced at the child in Ace's arms before catching his eye and nodding. The child was unconscious now, but he was still making noises of pain every time he was jostled when Ace was running. In addition to the large wound on his side, there was also an assortment of scratches that were no doubt given to him by the island's plants and some bruises that were already starting to form. "He's in pretty bad shape, yoy." Of course he's in bad shape. The kid was just attacked by that monster tiger. Thatch rolled his eyes. That tiger wasn't weak, either. "Yeah," Ace commented dryly, holding the boy closer to his chest. "We noticed." "I'm so going back for it later." Ace could practically see the gears turning in Thatch's head. Possible thinking of hundreds of ways to cook tiger. That tiger is a dead animal walking. There is no way that thing is going to see tomorrow. "Have fun with that," Ace told him with a snort. By now, Ace's chest had been stained red and whenever he moved it felt slick and rather disgusting. He could feel it dripping down and soaking into his pants. He hissed, "Shit, how the hell is this kid still alive?" It took around 2 minutes of full-blown sprinting before the three were back on the boat. Ace didn't bother to say hello, wave or even answer any questions as he ran down the long, wooden hallways of the armory. He could leave Marco and Thatch to deal with the details in his pestering family. Not even knocking, Ace burst through the infirmary door, startling some of the nearby nurses. The ship's head doctor looked up at Ace's panting form before sighing and rolling her eyes. "You again? Come on, Ace. Don't you have anything better to do than spending time in the infirmary? I swear you visit me at least once a week. I don't have time to treat you, especially if it's something stupid like a paper cut." Ace glared at her, trying to catch his breath. "Not the time. Kid, help him," before gently placing the small child on the nearest bed. "Oh," the doctor raced over to the child to get a better look. A curious spark appeared in her eyes, the kind of spark that only doctors had whenever they brought in someone new to dissect. Okay. Maybe not dissect, but that's what it looked like to Ace. "What do we have here? A new patient?" She quickly snapped on a pair of blue gloves before examining the boy's battered form. A frown creased on her face before she started ordering the nurses around her. She looked up at Ace with worried eyes. "He's in pretty bad condition. How'd you find him?" Ace had finally caught his breath. "We found him on the island. There was this giant tiger attacking him. That's pretty much all I know other than he was pretty scared when I approached him." She took off the cloth that Ace had put on his wound before carefully examining that. "A giant tiger? Huh? I don't even want to know. You always find the craziest shit, don't you, Portgas?" To be fair, it was Marco's fault. Sure. "Oi," Ace glared playfully at the doctor as she went back to looking the kid over, poking the wound on his side. Even unconscious, the boy squirmed. "I'm serious. It was Marco's fault. I'm the bystander here." The doctor put 2 fingers to the boy's neck, checking his pulse. The kid did nothing more than twitch once, making the doctor sigh and run her fingers through the boy's hair. The boy reacted to the touch, moving his head closer to her hand. "He should be dead." She finally tore her eyes off the boy as another nurse grabbed him and took him out of sight. The doctor looked at Ace and gave a small, reassuring smile. "I don't know how that kid is still alive. He's going to need surgery, but he should be fine. If he wakes up, he'll need to rest, eat and not move around too much or else it'll reopen up his wounds. But he's young, he should heal fast. If he survives the next 24 hours, that is." Ace raised an eyebrow. "Aren't you going to patch him up? Work your doctor like magic?" "Not with you here, flame brain." The doctor snorted, made a shooing motion with her hands and literally shoved him towards the door. He stumbled a bit before he caught himself and looked at her. "Off you go. I'll tell you if anything happens." With a large sigh, Ace nodded and headed the rest of the distance towards the door. His fingers brushed the wood's smooth surface and he looked back at the doctor. "I trust you to help him," he said simply, meeting her gaze. The woman nodded and grinned as she disappeared around the other door, leaving Ace to wonder what the hell had just happened to his calm and peaceful day. The door shut quietly behind Marco. The shadows casted long shadows all over his body as he calmly walked up to the other, much larger, man. He looked tired, almost dragging his feet, but managed to stand straight and look as dignified as he could muster. "We didn't find anyone else on the island, Oyaji." "Oh, so that brat was alone?" Whitebeard expected as much, but it still bothered him. A child should not live alone in somewhere as dangerous as the New World. Everyone that was considered his son knew this and respected it. That's why they helped as many as they could. This was a special case, however, since there were no reported villages on the island and no one to take care of the boy. There was really only one option. "Possibly. What do you plan on doing?" Marco sounded almost amused, though the tiredness in his voice was evident. His facade was slowly slipping from his face as he talked to one of the few people in his life that he actually trusted. A booming laugh echoed throughout the walls. "I think you know, Marco." Marco simply rolled his eyes fondly. There were still doubts lingering in the air that he didn't really have the heart to point out, but he did want to make sure that their father was completely serious. They didn't want to end up with a brat that didn't like where he was. It would be torture for all of them. "Are you sure? He is just a child after all. He might not even want this." "Nonsense." Whitebeard's voice sounded much older and much wiser. Even in the poorly lit room, you could see the small twinkle in his eyes. What child doesn't want a father? Ace didn't. There wasn't a shred of hesitation in Marco's reply. Another booming laugh shook the whole room. "Is that so? But I'm not changing my decision." With a resigned sigh, the blonde turned around and allowed a small smile to grace his lips. "All right, Oyaji." The child was terrified. It wasn't hard to tell. Ace had always been bad with kids, especially kids who looked torn between attacking or running away, neither of which Ace wanted to deal with. As soon as the boy woke up, Ace knew there was going to be trouble. Now here he was, alone in the room trying to get the child to calm down. The doctor had just laughed and told him good luck, and Marco and Thatch were doing other things. Thatch probably pranking someone. Marco was scouring the island for any villages or towns. Plus, Ace didn't trust anyone else with the kid. The rest of the crew wouldn't know how to deal with this kind of problem. Not that Ace knew much either. This was a problem that really couldn't be fixed by swords, guns, or any other sort of weapon. Unless you wanted to purposely hurt the kid, which no one did, like the Whitebeard pirates were accustomed to. To sum it up, Ace had no clue what he was doing. Could you blame him though? It's not every day that you find a kid on an island, hurt and alone, and bring him back to the ship only to be dumped into Ace's loving care. Damn it, what was he supposed to do? He was raised by mountain bandits. They don't just go around teaching brats that they hate how to take care of random toddlers that they find on islands. Plus, fire wasn't that nice of an element unless you want to get burned. Ace had yet to hurt his family with his abilities, and he certainly didn't want to start now. "Hey," Ace tried for his nicest voice. The least he could do was try and talk to the kid, right? Maybe he could set up a treaty of peace. He doesn't cry and Ace doesn't burn his mouth together, as if he'd do that. He'd not that cruel. But the thought did come to his mind once or twice. Calm down. It's okay, we aren't going to hurt you. The child only backed up further on the bed, pushing his back against the wall. Ace didn't know if the boy registered what he said, or even if he understood what he said. It honestly wouldn't surprise him if the child didn't know how to speak. He was so damn small. How old was he, 2? Maybe 4. Ace wasn't really good with ages. Or children. Or anything other than battle and hunting. The fire user had to hold back a sigh. He knew that this was going to be difficult the moment the child woke up. Hell, he was having nightmares about what he was possibly going to tell this kid's parents, if they found any. Maybe something along the lines of, "Hey, I almost watched your child get eaten by a giant tiger and we brought him to the world's most powerful man to help him and stuff. Anyways, here you go, have him back now." Then a frown creased his face. Did this child even have parents? It wouldn't be the first time that Ace had met a homeless child, and he never really thought it would be the last, but he did have to wonder where the child came from. Abandoned or not, who would just leave a 4-year-old boy to roam a dangerous island like that? The boy was lucky that he wasn't eaten in the first 2 or 3 minutes. Ace even had trouble walking through the man-eating plants and animals that constantly watched you. How would a normal person, no, a child, feel? Like shit, probably. He wondered how many times the child was attacked by the island and how much damage did it really do. He wasn't worried about the physical aspect as much. No, Ace was much more worried about the mental damage that an experience like that could cause. Then he thought about his own grandpa, Garp. What had that crazy old shit done to him when he was a kid? Ace couldn't even count the number of times he was hit on the head, thrown off a cliff or thrown into the ocean when he couldn't swim. Maybe this kid's mom or dad was like that as well. Hell, maybe they were even worse than that. If they were, Ace's heart went out to the boy. Wait, he was assuming too much, he needed to focus. He still had a terrified 4-year-old to look after, right? After all, the moment he showed signs of waking, the doctor dragged him into the infirmary and demanded that he watch over the child and calm him down if needed. Didn't she know that fire was generally not used to calm people down? The best he could do was knock him out again, but he didn't really think that was a great idea considering the minimal trust level the boy had for them now. How would he react if Ace attacked him? The brat wouldn't take it well. Ace could guarantee that. Ace had wanted to complain, oh yes. He had wanted to complain a lot, but that woman was about as stubborn as a mule, maybe more. Once look from her was enough to send a zebra towards a lion and beg to be eaten. Though most of Oyaji's doctors and female nurses were like this, honestly, how did Oyaji get all the ladies? And the feisty ones at that? He was like a woman beacon, being old didn't seem to hinder him that much. The fire user shuddered to think of Oyaji as a young and handsome man, it just didn't fit. Now here he was, stuck with babysitting the very kid that he was losing sleep over. This time, the sigh did escape his mouth and he reached out to stroke the boy's hair, not really thinking things through. Hadn't he paid attention to the warning signs? He should have listened to his gut that screamed, don't do it, because, damn, he made contact all right, but it wasn't the positive outcome that he had thought would happen in his head. The brat had bit him and, god damn it, it hurt. Let me go, Ace yelped, more in surprise than actual pain, and tried to pry the boy off him, but the boy had a grip of steel. The chocolate brown eyes glared at him, though the fear was still apparent. Ace could tell by the way this kid moved that everything that he's doing was purely on the instinct and survival skill that he'd no doubt picked up on the island. Come on, you brat, Ace growled, annoyed. He could have just turned into fire, but there was a large chance that he'd burn the kid's mouth if he did, and the last thing he wanted was to deal with hurting one of the doctor's patients. He'd end up in the emergency room. He shuddered just imagining what they'd do to him. Please let go, he tried the gentler and calming approach. Letting his glare soften, he looked at the boy with big puppy dog eyes that to do a backflip. Okay. That was a joke. There was no way in hell that Marco would do a backflip for him. After a few more minutes of gentle persuasion, Ace gave up. He sat back in his chair, and let out a large, annoyed sigh. This really wasn't his day, was it? You aren't letting go, are you? Ace accused the youth. He wanted his hand back, besides, it was already starting to bleed and sting to a point that made it uncomfortable to move. The boy shook his head in defiance, letting some of the fear fade from his eyes. The fire user supposed it as because he didn't try and hurt the brat and instead choose other ways of getting through to him. Ace was glad that he got a response at the very least. He wasn't sure if the boy was able to understand what he was trying to say to him. This could have been so much worse if he couldn't speak. Ace shuddered to think about what they'd do. He didn't know how well the boy could understand them, but at least they got somewhere right. They didn't have much, but it was a start. Ace always hated starts. Ace put his elbow on his knee, leaning up closer to the boy before resting his head on his free hand. Can you please let go? I use this hand a lot. A once again tried to wiggle his hand free, but the child's mouth just clamped down even harder. Ace glared at the boy and the boy just glared right back, not backing down once. Ace was surprised to say the least. Very few people could stand up to his glare, but here he was, facing down a 4-year-old boy and losing. Losing was not a vocab word in Ace's book. Not that he knew many vocab words to begin with, especially to little kids with big attitudes. Why couldn't you have bitten Marco's hand? Ace continued to complain, unaware of the loud footsteps outside of the room. The stinging pain had dulled to an annoying throb for now, and for some reason every time Ace felt his heartbeat, his left ear twitched. Another annoyance to add to his long list. I bet his would taste better. Like chicken. You know that he's a firebird, right? A phoenix. It's basically a turkey with blue fire. He also has this weird hair that looks like a pineapple. You like pineapples, right? Okay. We have a plan. Go bite Marco. The child didn't even twitch, just sitting in the same spot, not moving. Ace was vaguely aware that he was ranting about things that really didn't make sense, and in the back of his mind he wondered if the boy had rabies. Let go already. The fire user's voice was starting to come out as an annoyed whine. It's not like he cared. No one else was in the room other than the 4-year-old who apparently wants to eat him. Cannibalism. Who would have thought? If he knew that the inhabitants of this monstrous island were cannibals, then they would have avoided this whole mess altogether. Can't even take care of a kid, yo? Marco? Ace cried out happily, turning around as fast as he could. Maybe his friend could help him pry this brat off of him, right? Or even better, the brat will lose interest in him and go try and eat Marco instead. Help me. But for now he'd settle with any help he could get. Marco gave him an unimpressed yet disapproving look that only Marco could do. The phoenix walked up to the boy and sat on the bed next to him. The child gave him a wary glance, but didn't let go of Ace's hand. Marco looked like he was suppressing a smirk and ruffled the boy's hair like Ace had tried to do before. The only difference was Marco didn't get bit, much to Ace's disappointment. Stubborn little thing, aren't you? Marco allowed a rare, soft smile to appear on his lips. A calming gesture. Ace frowned a little. Why was Marco so good at stuff like this? Whenever Ace tried to be nice to kids, he either got rocks thrown at his head or he gets bit. Children hated him and he didn't necessarily like children. Come on now. Marco's hands went under the child's stomach to scoop him up, bringing Ace's hand with him. Ace frowned and once again shook his hand to hopefully get the boy to let go. It didn't work. Let go of Ace. He probably doesn't taste great, doesn't he, yo? Oi. Marco. Rude. Ace shot his friend a warning look that clearly said, don't test me right now, I'm being bitten by a 4-year-old and I'm not happy. At first he'd been worried for the shitty brat and this is what he gets. No, Ace wasn't very happy. He was going to make this clear to everyone that's around him. But the words did have the affect that Ace had hoped for initially. The boy gave a wide-eyed look at Marco, almost as if he expected to be attacked, and let go of Ace's hand. Instantly Ace was rubbing his new wound, glaring at pretty much everything that moved and made noises. His savior was no exception. He stood up from his chair with a grunt and went to the first aid kit. Ace took out the alcohol and started to disinfect his hand, ignoring the annoying stain, then wrapped a white bandage around it. He glanced back at the kid who was quietly sitting in Marco's lap looking uncomfortable. Tension ran through the air and Ace thought the black-haired brat was about to run away. Ace gave the boy a criticizing look as he shut the cabinet and walked back to the bed in order to kneel straight in front of the small child. His gray eyes bore into the wide brown ones of the child and said in the most serious yet gentle voice he could muster up, that wasn't very nice, you know. The boy gave him an innocent look like he didn't know what Ace was taking about. Ace snorted and stood up, stretching his arms over his head. Smartass. Marco rolled his eyes, the lazy expression coming back to his face. Ace quit harassing the kid. I bet he's had enough shit for a while. But he bit me. Ace's lips formed into a pout, his eyes shining with something akin to hurt. Why was it his fault? Why was the phoenix scolding him? The kid started it. It's not like he wanted to be bit by a 4-year-old that might or might not have rabies. Ace. Whitebeard hummed as he looked upon the 3 figures in front of him. 2 of them were his sons that had always made him so proud, and the other was the child that Whitebeard was not so secretly wishing for him to join his family. It didn't matter if he knew the boy or not, everyone deserved a family. That was his wish, his dream. To have a family. Some might laugh and call him stupid and idiotic, but they knew nothing. They'd just snort at the idea and say something like, why would the strongest man in the world want that? How pathetic. Whitebeard would laugh in their faces and tell them that they were 100 years too young to understand, because they were. It wasn't hard to see it in their eyes. He'd encountered thousands of men and none of them had understood the need for family. The ones that did were his sons. But this child, a mere toddler, knew more about it than all of those idiots combined. He knew it hurt to be alone. He wanted a family. Whitebeard could see it in the child's eyes. He was alone and it was hurting him. Because for some reason, this child knew that being alone was worse than being hurt. They said that they would heal his outside wounds, so why not heal his heart as well? The child of his thoughts was currently in Marco's arms, looking up at the giant man with awe and a little bit of fear, but there was that spark of curiosity that caught Whitebeard's attention. The giant could understand the fear. He'd scared even some of his bravest sons, but the fact that he was openly curious was special, was unique. How strange. His eyes reminded Whitebeard of when he met Ace. Ace wasn't scared either, though he wasn't curious either. Ace had one mindset at the time: kill. He'd probably been raised like that, though Whitebeard didn't know. Didn't care. It was his son's past and he'd already shared more than enough information. The giant's eyes wandered to his black-haired son, analyzing him. Whitebeard knew his sons well. He knew their moods, how they reacted. The man knew that something was wrong the moment the fire user had walked in, though it was already painfully obvious. He could practice motions radiate in waves. Annoyance, anger, and overall he was just in a very pissy mood. Whitebeard noted the newly wrapped bandage on his son's hand and gave him a questioning look, though on the inside, he already knew where it came from. Ace's eyes flicked towards the boy in Marco's arms, then back again with narrowed eyes, giving Whitebeard all the information that he needed. He couldn't help the smirk that formed on his face. The boy was already causing trouble, huh? And to think that they didn't even know his name. Brat, Whitebeard addressed the kid like he did everyone else. He might have been young, but he wasn't an exception. With a lazy eye roll, Marco set the boy on the ground, giving him a gentle push forward. The boy stumbled before he caught himself, staring up at the giant man with an unblinking owlish gaze. "What's your name?" The kid didn't answer for several seconds. Whitebeard worried that the rumors were true. The boy didn't even know how to speak. Maybe he didn't even understand them. "Luffy," the boy muttered after a while, awkwardly shifting his feet and breaking eye contact with Whitebeard to stare at the ground. Whitebeard let out a breath that he didn't know he was holding in, so he could speak. Whitebeard gave the child a small smile, bending over and gesturing for him to come closer. Luffy lifted his head from the ground, hesitating for only a moment before he padded over to Whitebeard's leg and looked up at the man that towered over him. Using only one huge arm, Whitebeard scooped up the tiny figure and placed him on his leg. The boy let out a yelp of surprise, but he was soon quiet again. "Luffy?" Whitebeard hummed, closing his eyes and leaning back in his seat. He could feel the boy's eyes on him and he cracked open his own. Luffy tilted his head to the side and nodded in confirmation. With a smile, Whitebeard grinned and continued. "Well then, Luffy, where are your parents?" He knew the answer, of course. It was made painfully obvious by the boy's beaten form. He was skinny, frightfully so, as if he hadn't eaten in a long time. Small scars covered his entire body, and though they were small, they were still slightly worrisome. His black hair was covered in dirt, though it wasn't matted like Whitebeard expected it to be. Ace had even said that the boy had something wrapped around a rather fresh injury, as if it were a homemade bandage. Little Luffy looked confused, even going as far as tilting his head to the side. Parents, the phrase confused him. He knew what the word meant, though he didn't know what exactly parents were. He didn't have any parents. Or anyone for that matter. He had been alone from before he could remember. Though he did have flashes. Sometimes of the water, a storm, and even a figure. A beautiful figure. Someone with blonde hair that seemed to radiate warmth. Luffy wanted that warmth. He shook his head at the giant man and stilled. "Thought so. Do you have any family looking after you?" "No." The kid looked miserable, like he was remembering a painful memory. His eyes were clouded and he looked down at his hands, twisting them. "Alone." Whitebeard noticed that Ace and Marco had frowns on their faces as well. "Is that so? So no one is looking after you?" "No," came the same reply. "Alone." Whitebeard hummed, thinking his decision over. If a child were to join them, how would the other commanders and crewmates react? Whitebeard wouldn't consider the boy weak. But there was no way that a 4-year-old could hold his own against the people that challenged him every day. They'd have to train him, protect him. But then again, that was what family was for. The giant smiled, ruffling Luffy's raven locks. The boy looked up, his eyes rather wide. "How would you like to join us? We could be your family." Marco looked impassive, though he already knew about this, so it wouldn't really surprise him, but Ace's eyes widened impossibly wide. "But Oyaji." "Hush, brat," Whitebeard commanded, not in the mood for interruptions. He continued to look into Luffy's eyes, nothing else. Luffy had to say yes. He had to choose on his own. They couldn't be a family if the boy didn't want one. It's the boy's decision. "Family?" The 4-year-old almost sounded wishful as he gripped Whitebeard's pants tightly. The boy was tense, guarded. "I don't have a family." "You could," Whitebeard told him gently. There was no way they were just going to leave the boy on this island to fend for himself like he had to before but couldn't take in a child who didn't want to be taken away. If they left him on the island, Whitebeard doubted he'd live to 6 years old. If Marco, Ace and Thatch hadn't found him, then there was a big chance that even the best doctors in the world wouldn't be able to save him. "We could be your family." "I want a family," Luffy said in a childish voice, looking up with big brown eyes. Whitebeard couldn't help but smile and ruffled the boy's hair with his thumb. Looking into eyes so young, so innocent sent a warm feeling throughout his whole body. "You be my family?" The smile that felt like it would never leave Whitebeard's face appeared. He stood up, carrying the boy with him to the upper deck. "Of course, Luffy. We'll be your family, always." The news spread like a wildfire. A new brother? A kid? The residents of the Moby didn't know what to make of the situation. There had been rumors, of course. It's hard for rumors to not spread, especially with all the commanders seemingly busy. They'd heard of the boy. "Did you know he defeated a tiger all on his own? A kid? No way?" Heard that Oyaji took a liking to him and offered him a family. They were familiar with that, of course. All of them needed a family and Oyaji was always there to provide. But for a child, well, it was a new experience for everyone. They were pirates, not babysitters. But that didn't stop them from crowding around the infirmary, trying to get a peek at their newest brother. The commanders didn't have the heart to tell them to stop. They thought it would be hard to accept a younger brother on the ship. After all, the new world was a dangerous place. The commanders assured the crew that they would handle it, but everyone was still worried. Who was going to protect the brat when someone attacked? Who was babysitting to make sure he didn't hurt himself? To make sure he ate properly? He was, after all, just a child. The crew didn't know how to handle children. It took a while, about 2 months, for some to even come into terms that they would now be raising this brat. That being said, none were complaining. The boy had managed to worm his way into all of their hearts. So when they were attacked, no problem, they would protect him. Found him wandering the Moby lost and confused, they would guide him to one of the commanders. Found him in a dangerous situation, they would save him. They would protect him until he was old enough to protect himself. He was their little brother. And they would always have his back. "Get back here," that was Ace. Everyone's head swiveled in the direction where a loud crash was heard, followed by a squeal. Not know what to make of the situation. The pirates only watched as a fun-sized blur of black and red raced past them and hid behind Oyaji's head, oblivious to everything around him. Another loud crash was heard and Ace raced up the steps like the blur had. Though, unlike the mystery creature, Ace did notice all the stares him was getting but simply ignored them. He stopped right in the middle of the deck so they could all get a good look at while Ace was so angry. Several commanders had to hold in pearls of laughter. It seemed as if their youngest brother decided to play Connect the Freckles. "Luffy, get your ass out here now," Ace growled, glaring at Whitebeard's legs. Too curious, brown eyes popped out from the side, looking at Ace with fear. "This is permanent marker. Do you even know what permanent means? It doesn't come off." But Ace looks pretty. Luffy looked away shyly, giving everyone his "I'm innocent" look. He usually does when he knows he's in trouble but doesn't want to get caught, even if everyone knows it's already him. The surrounding pirates couldn't help it. They finally burst out into full-blown laughter, some even falling to the deck clutching their sides. Fire raced along Ace's shoulders as he glared daggers at everyone that sat on deck. Sadly, it didn't look as threatening when he has what looked like a crudely drawn flower on his left cheek. "Quite the troublemaker, aren't you?" Whitebeard said with a smile as he scooped up the child that stubbornly refused to let go of the giant's leg in fear that he was going to die a horrible, painful death by the hands of his new friend. But Oyaji, Whitebeard smiled at the name the boy used and stroked his hair. It was hard not to. After all, his eyes looked just like a puppy's. Ace sleep on floor and he cold. The child's lips formed into a pout. So marker wake him up. Oh, that's a load of she. You drew on his face to wake him up? Whitebeard raised an amused eyebrow, cutting Ace off. The boy vigorously nodded his head. You know that he doesn't get cold, right? Ace is made of fire. Said fireman stalked off after he realized that he wouldn't be getting to the child anytime soon. Whitebeard watched as the rest of his sons snickered, nudging and pointing at his face. Vista whistled at him right before he disappeared below deck. Bringing his attention back to Luffy, he watched as the boy tilted his head to the side. Ace made of fire? Whitebeard laughed. He ate a devil fruit. You know what a devil fruit is, don't you, brat? The child shook his head, looking up at Whitebeard with eyes that held such curiosity that it made it hard not to just straight out tell the child what they were. But no, sadly Luffy wouldn't understand him if he gave the standard definition of a devil fruit. They're these fruits that taste really bad. Whitebeard stuck out his tongue to prove his point, making Luffy giggle. And they give you powers. Power? The boy leaned eagerly towards Whitebeard's, wanting to hear more. What powers? The boy was leaning so far forward that he fell flat on his face. Rubbing his nose, Luffy quickly composed himself, his cheerful expression never changing. Like Ace's fire, or sometimes it's animals like a tiger lord. Whitebeard had no clue what a tiger lord was but nodded his head anyways. Like a tiger lord, Whitebeard agreed. The boy seemed to ponder this idea for a few minutes before he asked Whitebeard in a hesitant voice, like rubber, too? Rubber? Why rubber of all things? Yes. I guess that there is a possibility of a rubber devil fruit? Nay, the boy seemed to be taking this topic very seriously. A little too seriously for the giant's liking. He knew something was up. Something was bothering his child. Devil fruit, bad. Why would you say that? Whitebeard made sure that Luffy was looking directly into his eyes. He needed to know, or else this piece of information might get him killed later. Just because a person has a devil fruit doesn't mean that they're bad, brat. It just means that they're special. Tears appeared in the brat's eyes. Whitebeard had to wonder how this conversation took such a dark turn. Said they bad, Luffy said in a childish voice, seeming to recall words. Bad, go die. Now Whitebeard was even more confused. Why would someone tell a child that? Then another though struck him. How did Luffy have human contact? Wasn't he abandoned? Thoughts swirled around in his head as he stroked his mustache. The words weren't uncommon, especially in the blues, but for a child to hear them, why would someone say that to you, Luffy? The boy seemed to be thinking of the right words as he fidgeted uncomfortably on Whitebeard's large lap. There was a silent pause before Luffy spoke up again. Rubber. Rubber. Slowly, the boy held out a finger and grabbed it, causing it to stretch to an impossible length. Whitebeard sat back in his chair, not as surprised as he thought he'd be. So the brat ate a devil fruit, huh? That would explain the interest of the topic and even the reason someone might say stupid things to a 4-year-old. Allowing the grin that he'd wore before to appear again, Whitebeard pulled the boy in for a hug. Luffy stiffened in his arms as if he ever surprised at the touch. Maybe he was. Whitebeard didn't know the boy's past and nor did he care. This child was his son. Did you think we'd treat you differently because of a silly thing like that? Whitebeard asked softly. He felt Luffy nod into his chest and a sigh escaped his lips. The giant man knew about this. He'd even had sons who were insecure about their devil fruit power for fear of separation from others. Once, a long time ago, Whitebeard himself had had that same fear. Luffy, Whitebeard pulled away and made sure the boy's eyes were locked with his. You're our family, we're not going to treat you differently just because you're special. Luffy smiled. A real one this time, and wiped the upcoming tears from his eyes. Thanks, Oyaji. Whitebeard laughed, ruffling the boy's hair once more. Of course, brat. Izo. What, brat? Izo turned to snap at their newest addition months now, and not only had Luffy adapted to ship life well, his vocabulary and grammar were also improving. It was much easier to understand what he wanted when he could tell everyone. The small boy bounded up to him, looking up with wide curiosity. Whatcha doing? It's what are you, not whatcha, Izo corrected automatically before shaking his head with a grin. He pulled the ropes down a bit more, shouting orders at his division. I'm adjusting the sail. There's a storm coming, but Grand Line weather is always unpredictable, so we're making sure that nothing's happening. Oh, the boy said, looking the other crew members as they raced around deck. Hard to port, one man shouted. What port? Luffy asked, tilting his head to the side. No one has taught you that, yet. Izo frowned. I'm surprised. You'll need to know about that stuff if you're gonna live on a boat. Izo pointed over to the left-hand side of the Moby. That's port, the other side is starboard. He pointed towards the front of the boat. That's the bow and the back is the aft. Just say right and left? Luffy scrunched his face up in confusion, not understanding. Izo laughed. Because it's confusing. Your right and left are different than my right and left because I'm facing you. Starboard and port are based on where that bow and the aft are, so we know which side to go to. Oh, okay, the child grinned up at him. Hey, Izo? Is today 20 questions? Izo really didn't mind having the brat out there, though. He was a welcome distraction to otherwise mundane duties. Why do you wear makeup? Oh, Izo grinned at him. He's heard this question a lot over the years, sometimes good, sometimes bad. But he didn't sense any malice in Luffy's voice. He didn't even know if the kid had a mean bone in his body. Because I like it and it makes me pretty. Luffy nodded in agreement, seemingly lost in thought. Jiru and Ace had wandered up to the top deck to help out, it seemed, as they approached. Luffy turned and glanced at the newcomers before giving a wide smile. Jiru should wear makeup too. The commander looked confused. Why me? Izo said it makes him look pretty, so maybe it'll make you look pretty too. Ace and Izo chalked on their laughs as Jiru floundered around, not quite sure how to respond. Eventually, neither could hold in their laughter as Jiru's face turned more and more red. The 14th Division commander sighed before racing over and picking the brat up. Wow, fast! Luffy said happily right as the commander began to mercilessly tickle him. The boy shrieked in laughter. No, tickles, want down. What was that, brat? Jiru asked, but never stopped tickling. Sorry, Luffy wheezed. Jiru seemed hesitant, but eventually stopped his tickle attack and set the boy on the ground. Izo watched as he laughed, grinning brightly up at Jiru. Seriously, how is that man so good with kids? Before running off in another direction, probably to find more trouble. It took almost a year for the Moby to settle back to a normal schedule. From Luffy's arrival to the fact that Thatch had seemed to adopt the kid as his apprentice, he was oddly good at sneaking around. Things were rarely peaceful anymore. But for some reason today was oddly quiet. There was not running, no screaming, no giggling, and overall nothing but the sound of the waves as they slammed against the hull of the ship and the idle chatter of the crew. Of course the crew members were suspicious. It was rarely this quiet, but they can't say that they didn't enjoy it. Now 5 years old, Luffy proved to be quite a handful when he wanted to be. In fact, just yesterday the boy and Thatch had been playing a simple game of tag until Thatch had cornered the kid. Luffy, being the idiot he was, saw no way to escape the evil man's grasp other than jumping off the ship. Thatch had to jump in afterwards and both came up smiling like they just had the best time ever until Thatch realized that his hair was ruined, so he started yelling at the boy for being reckless. So the crew couldn't say they were surprised when Luffy came running up on the deck, his cheeks inflated as if something were shoved in his mouth, and immediately hid behind Nemours' legs, breathing rather heavily. It was suspicious, yes, but at the moment they were happy that nothing was exploding or randomly catching on fire. Nemours simply raised an eyebrow, looking at Luffy with slight curiosity. What was it this time? Maybe he raided the kitchen like he always does. But then again, he usually won't go hide behind someone's legs unless it was a bigger prank than that. Most of the time, it was Ace storming up on deck, his face painted, covered in whipped cream, covered in sparkles, covered in paint, covered in feathers, covered in honey or anything else that was in his short reach. But today Luffy had apparently decided to mix it up a little. Where is the brat? Thatch's voice bellowed from below deck. The boy in question squeaked, terrified of Thatch's wrath, and pressed himself harder into Nemours' legs, burying his face into his jeans. Nemours snorted, though he was secretly happy that it wasn't Ace this time. The last prank didn't have a happy ending when Marco had to tackle Ace so he wouldn't throw Luffy overboard. There was a loud boom as Thatch jumped onto the deck, pissed and pink everywhere. covering the commander head to toe was covered in pink glitter. His hair wasn't neat and his strange hairstyle wasn't like it normal was. Instead it was loose, free and yes, pink. Namur chuckled, looking directly down at the boy who stood perfectly still as if Namur's leg was the perfect camo after he'd pulled a big stunt. "Luffy, what did you do?" Swallowing whatever was in his cheeks, Namur didn't really want to know. The kid looked at him, his dark hair flopping in his face. "Thatch is pretty pink." "Why?" Namur had a smile on his face as he was trying to hold back a laugh that would no doubt get the cook mad at him as well. Luffy had this strange habit of either drawing on the commanders' faces, Izo was pissed when he was the victim, painting them different colors, or messing with their personal supplies. Afterwards he would always claim that he was just trying to make them pretty. Namur was pretty sure it started when Izo showed Luffy how he put on makeup. Afterwards, Luffy wanted to try it on basically everyone else, but since makeup wasn't exactly a readily available source, the brat made do with what he had. Because he sparkles, the child looked down at his hands, but Namur couldn't help but think the boy was proud of what he did. Ace was completely out of the world when he was asleep, so he was an easy target. Thatch was much harder to trick, considering that he was a veteran pranker himself and had a good nose for things like up-and-coming pranks. "Oi, Thatch!" Haruta called out to her fellow commander as Thatch stormed around deck demanding to know where Luffy was so he could wring his rubber neck. Namur watched with mild curiosity as the cook's sharp gaze landed on the swordswoman. "Did your own apprentice outsmart you? Really? A 5-year-old was able to do this to you?" Haruta barked a laugh and slapped her knee, mockingly. "Oh, this is too good." "Shut up." Thatch's glare sharpened even more. "He made something pink explode in my bathroom and then he took my hair gel hostage." By the end of the sentence Thatch was starting to whine, flipping his hair lifelessly. "I need my hair gel. Oh. And after he grabbed my hair gel the little shit then had the nerve to raid the kitchen and steal a whole chicken." Namur looked back at the child sitting at his legs. Sure enough, the brat had the giant bottle of Thatch's hair gel locked firmly in his hands. How had Namur not noticed that? The commander leaned down and picked the boy up looking at him with a smirk on his face, showing off his shark teeth. "You should probably go and give Thatch back his hair gel before he kills everyone on deck." Luffy pouted, his bottom lip sticking out, "But then Thatch won't be pretty and at." "You guys are too loud," Ace, who probably fell asleep next to the mast sometime before Thatch arrived, muttered, turning on his side. There was a snore before the man grumbled, "Luffy, don't draw on my face." "You," apparently Thatch had found Luffy. "Give me back my hair gel." "No." Luffy squeaked and tried to get out of Namur's iron grip. Seeing that Namur wasn't going to let go of him, Luffy looked up at the fishman and gave him his best puppy dog eyes. "I don't want to die." Storming up to the pair, Thatch snatched the bottle from Luffy's tiny hands and glared at the 5-year-old boy who was still in Numar's arms. "Try that again and it'll be the last thing you do." "Thatch looks pretty," the child offered, hoping to calm down the raging brunette. "Damn right I do." Frowning, Thatch took the child out of Namur's arms and carried him back below deck, scolding the poor child how it wasn't nice to prank his mentor and to never steal his hair gel again. And everyone else never saw this happen, fearing for their own lives. Running into a child wasn't on the pirate captain's list of things to do. He'd never had the patience to deal with children. Hell, he even killed his own son since he couldn't handle the whining. But this child, the one that had been following the pirate group for around an hour, was the single most annoying thing that anyone on his crew had ever experienced. At first, they tried to ignore that child's blabbering about being lost and whatnot, focusing on restocking supplies and hoping that the child would run into his mom or dad and leave. Sadly, no such thing happened, so the small boy continued to follow them until the pirate captain snapped, turning around and snarling at the boy. "Don't you know who we are, you damn brat?" Instead of flinching and running away screaming like the man expected the child to do, the boy just blinked up at him happily, offering a smile that seemed to split his face in two. "Not a clue," he said happily. It was almost like he didn't know how to be scared, which wasn't far from the truth. His crewmates fanned out on either side of him, grinning wickedly and hoping for their evil pirate faces to convince the kid that they were dangerous and should be treated as such. "I'm a pirate captain," he announced so everyone on the street could hear. Those who did hear quickly left to find shelter. Not one claimed the brat. "I'm a wanted man, you little shit. We're New World pirates. "Ya see? Now, scram." Again, the brat surprised him. "You have a bounty?" He was jumping up and down, eyes sparkling in the sunlight. "Really? How much?" "TCH," the pirate captain lashed out, aiming to kick the boy to the sand. He missed by only a few centimeters, but he did succeed on making the boy lose his balance and fall on his butt. "That shouldn't concern you right now," he whispered, low and dangerous. A few of his crewmates chuckled, egging him on. "What should concern you is that I've killed before, brat. I've killed men, women and children. You will be no exception." He unsheathed his sword. "We told you to leave, but you didn't listen. Let me have the honor of learning your name before you become a Sea King Streaks, hum?" Happy laughter rang throughout the air. "I'm Luffy." The child pushed the sword away from his face without a care. "Nah, is that a real sword? It looks a little different than Haruta or Vista's, but it's still sharp, right?" "Of course it's real." The pirate captain flicked his wrist, causing the sword to reflect the light. "You like it, yeah?" Luffy nodded, eye filled with childlike curiously. It's really pretty." "Get a good look at it, then," the pirate captain advised, raising the sword above his head, ready to chop the child in half. "For it will be the last thing that you'll ever see." "Luffy!" A new voice rang out through the empty street, causing the pirate captain to momentarily stop mid-swing, eyes flashing angrily. "Ace!" And just like that the child was gone. The pirate captain and his crew blinked in confusion. Where the hell did he go? They turned around just in time to see the child being picked up by young man. He had no shirt on, just an orange hat and some shorts along with combat boots and a knife. The man, Ace was it, glared at all of them, sending chills down their spine. "And what?" he said in a dangerously low voice as he took a step toward them, hand resting on a knife at his waist. "Do we have here?" "I found this guy and followed him here," Luffy informed happily, throwing his arms around the man's neck. Ace's glare never once wavered, but his posture did relax somewhat. "He's really funny, he even showed me his sword." Ace hummed, shifting the boy so he was handing off his back. Dark gray eye had the pirate captain sweating buckets. "It looks like he was trying to hurt you, Luffy." But they were nice to me." Luffy cocked his head to the side as if he was truly confused. The captain had the sudden urge to slam his head against a brick wall. Wouldn't a normal 5-year-old be running to their mother crying by now? That's how the captain always assumed kids to be like. Snotty brats that completely depend on their mothers. "I don't think beheading you is considered nice," Ace responded with a thoughtless shrug. "Besides, they look pretty stupid. Maybe they're lost. You'd think pirates would clear out of town as soon as they hear Oyaji's name." "Oi!" the captain suddenly yelled out, tired of being annoyed and even more tired of being insulted and ignored. "Put the kid down and hand him over or you'll die with him." Some dangerous flashed in Ace's eyes. Something feral. He spun around to face the captain with a full-blown glare printed all over his face. The captain had always thought that freckles were supposed to make a person look childish, but nothing about this man screamed childish at the moment. Never. Ignore his mind screaming at him to run away. The pirate raised his sword out in front of him. It was supposed to be threatening, but the man in front of him didn't even flinch. "Is that so? Bring it." Ace simply responded by placing the child down by his feet and instructing him not to move before his shoulders erupted into white-hot flames. Well fuck. This man was a devil fruit user. Huh? Behind him, several of his crewmates gasped and stumped back. One of them called out, "Captain, don't fight him. Don't you realize who that is?" While another one cried, "It's him. Heiken no Ace, Whitebeard's 2nd Division commander?" "Whitebeard's 2nd Division, commander?" The sword clattered out of the captain's hands and he broke out into cold sweat. There was no way. No way to fight one of his commanders. The strongest man in the world has some of the most monstrous people that follow him and one was standing right in front of him, ready to fry his insides. For a moment, his mind wandered back to the kid and he assumed that the brat had some ties to the Whitebeard family. The pirate captain was extremely glad that he didn't kill the boy. Without another word, the pirate captain spun on his heels and ran. Ran faster than he'd ever run before. He didn't even glance back when the child shouted, "Bye-bye." And there was no way in hell he was ever coming back. It had been a surprisingly hot year for the crew. It hadn't snowed once since they'd basically adopted Luffy into the family. There hadn't been a winter island since, well, a long time. That was, until today. With a happy smile, Ace nudged the sleeping bundle next to him. Said bundle only groaned and pulled the blanket tighter over his body, trying to conserve heat. He was shivering slightly, but other than that he looked fine, cold. Ace had to muffle his laugh. Yeah, I know, buddy. But I have a surprise for you, so you have to get up, okay? A small tuft of raven black hair puffed its way out, followed by two big eyes. A surprise? Extra breakfast? Ace stood up and ruffled the child's soft hair. No extra breakfast, but it's just as good. I promise. The fire user only had a short-sleeved shirt on, even if his nakama were basically in bundles of cloth. It had turned out to be colder than they'd expected, and most of the time Whitebeard's crew didn't handle cold weather very well. Ace, on the other hand, didn't care either way. Being cold had never been a problem for him. Luffy wrapped the blanket around his small body as he stood up and bounced across the room a few times. He was still shaking and had both of his arms crossed over his chest so cold air would attack him. What surprise! Ace walked over to the place that they kept Luffy's clothes and pulled out a long-sleeve shirt, some warm pants and other warm accessories. He then walked back over to the bed and placed them down in front of Luffy, gesturing for him to get dressed. 10 minutes later, Ace was helping Luffy get his snow boots on and then leading him to the gallery to get breakfast. Thatch. Luffy rammed himself into the cook the moment he saw him, clinging to his legs. He looked up at the commander with those big doe eyes that seemed to be way too adorable for a 5-och, laughed and picked the boy up so that he was clinging to his back now. Did you see outside yet, Luffy? Luffy blinked and tilted his head to the side. What's outside? Thatch threw Ace a dirty look and whispered, you didn't tell him about the snow? While Ace just rubbed the back of his head and let out a small laugh. I thought I'd make it a surprise. Ace promised me extra meat. Luffy informed Thatch in the most serious voice that he knew how to do. Thatch just chuckled, deciding to amuse the child, and patted his head. He highly doubted that the fire user did that. Oi! Ace glared at the 5-year-old while he was stuffing his own plate with food. I didn't, you made that up. Luffy shook his head stubbornly, but there was a sly gleam to his eyes. Ace promised. I promised nothing, you dirty, little liar. Can you two not get in a fight over meat? Thatch said with a sigh. But everyone could tell that he was fond of the boy's antics. Honestly, it's like you two have the same mindset. Ace raised an eyebrow, offended. Did you just compare my mind to the mind of someone who still has trouble speaking? Ace is stupid. Luffy offered up his own opinion. He can't tie his shoelace. It's shoelace, Ace corrected before he processed what Luffy said. Oi, I'm not stupid, Brad. They walked over to the table and Ace sat across from Thatch and Luffy, who was now happily munching on his breakfast bacon. I don't know, Thatch ventured, an amused grin on his face. You have your moments, Ace. Hey, I can't argue with that. Thatch reached over the table and clasped the younger man on the back, grinning at the small victory. You're right, you can't. It was always like this during snow days. Thatch would always be this happy ball of energy, full of humor and pranks. Kingdu had once joked that snow just turned Thatch on, even if it wasn't quite phrased like that. It was true in a way. Snow always put Thatch in a good mood no matter the day. Did Ace say he was stupid? Luffy asked curiously, smiling at both of his parent-like figures. Before anyone could say anything else to add more heat to the already raging fire, Haruta slid her way right next to Ace and threw a careless arm around his shoulders. What's up, Ace? You look like you're about to burn down a building. She poked his cheek and laughed. Ace sent a glare towards Thatch and Luffy. Not a building. Just an annoying 5-year-old and a cook. Luffy squealed and immediately dove under the table, shouting, Meanie Ace. No one really cared at the moment since they all knew that he'd be back for his fresh plate of bacon. You try it and I'll paint your room pink, Thatch said, pointing a piece of bacon in Ace's direction as if that was supposed to be threatening, with sparkles. Haruta raised an amused eyebrow, a smirk playing on her face. You're just copying Luffy's idea from last year. Giggles from under the table indicated that the convict in question was still listening to everything they were saying. Snorting, Thatch slammed his hand on the table, probably to shut up the boy underneath. That was so not funny. Seeing where this was going, Ace grinned. I dunno, Thatch. It was pretty funny to watch you run around the ship with bright pink glitter all over you and your hair. Ace paused, and looked thoughtful for a moment. Actually, it was more of a nightmare, but whatever. Marco slid in the seat next to Thatch and looked down at Luffy's plate in front of him. Where's the brat? Ace flicked his head towards the table. He's hiding. Seeing this as the usual routine, Marco just shrugged and started picking off the uneaten parts of Luffy's plate with a grin, baiting the boy to come out. Aw, really? That's sad. He sure wasted a whole lot of food that I could eat. Don't eat my food, came the cry as the boy tried to come out from under the table, for some odd reason, climbing up Ace and using him like a rope and sitting back in his seat. Do you know what's outside, Luffy? Marco asked, taking the boy off the floor and into his arms. Luffy only shook his head. It's snowing outside. Luffy tilted his head to the side. What snow? What snow? Ace scoffed, standing up and taking both his and Luffy's plate to the trash. The snow is supposed to be your surprise and you don't even know what it is. Luffy squeaked and buried his head in Marco's shoulder. Sorry. Ace, cool it, Marco said before turning and walking out of the gallery with Ace and Haruto close on his heels. Thatch had to go help the cooks after the meal so he wouldn't join them until later. They walked around below deck for a while, hearing the shouts and cheers from everyone that was above deck. Luffy stared at the white wonderland around him. Several of the Whitebeard pirates were involved in what looked like a giant snowball fight that seemed to take over the deck. They were all laughing, and looked like they were really enjoying themselves. It had been a while since they'd had peace like this. That's snow? Luffy asked and unraveled one of his hands from Marco's neck to catch a falling snowflake. Pretty. Marco set the boy down in front of him while a lazy smile. Immediately, Luffy was off, practically diving into the snow laughing all the while. Almost immediately, he had been roped into playing a snowball fight with the rest of the crew. Despite his bad aim, he was doing pretty well. He's really grown on us, hasn't he? Haruto asked, smiling as she watched the boy play. I can't believe it's been a year, Ace sighed. Time just seems to fly out the window. Yeah, Haruto laughed and poked Ace's stomach. You're growing into an old man. The two started another playful argument, but Marco tuned them out. Had it really been a year? It didn't feel like it. It seemed like just yesterday they were on that island, facing down the giant tiger trying to save a boy they didn't know. Marco was immensely glad that they did though. It was hard to imagine life before Luffy's constant noise and cheerfulness. Ace should wear this one, Luffy said, holding up a black cape and some fake fangs. Vampire. Ace bent down and picked the boy up. You want me to be a vampire, huh? Luffy giggled in response, making Ace smile even wider. What are you going to be then? I thought you wanted to be a vampire? Luffy seemed to think about this for a second before he laughed and threw his arms around Ace's neck. I'ma be a pirate. Ace couldn't help it. He laughed. You can't be a pirate when you already are one, Luffy. The boy pouted and untangled himself from Ace's neck. Don't give me that look. You're supposed to dress up as something different from what you really are. How about a mummy? The boy shook his head. Too old. He pursed his lips in an adorable way that only Luffy could pull off, and dead. Pumpkin, too girly. Lion, I'm not a baby. Zombie, Luffy stuck his tongue out. They smell bad. You've never even met one before, Ace sighed. What about cat? No, you're impossible, you know that, right? Ace said as he carried Luffy. The boy was still so small, and the vampire costume over to the counter where a very pretty cashier waited patiently for them. Ace had to give her some respect. She knew that he was a commander, but she didn't look scared at all. She had simply told him that any paying customer was welcome with open arms and that if he didn't pay, she was going to kick his ass. Ace had simply laughed and told her that he'd be paying if he found something. Find everything all right? The cashier asked with a smile as Ace set Luffy down on the counter and handed her the vampire costume that Luffy had picked out for her. Kind of, he flashed her a smile and nudged Luffy. Luffy here wants to be something that he already is and refuses to be anything else. Pirate, the woman guessed as she rang up the costume. Ace nodded with an eye roll, making the woman laugh. I might have some other costumes in the back. He'd look cute in a dinosaur costume. Luffy puffed, put his C not cute. The woman ruffled his hair. Okay. No dinosaur costume. How about a knight? Luffy tilted his head to the side. What's a knight? Knights are brave and noble. They go around protecting others by slaying dragons with really cool armor on. The woman tried to explain to the boy whose attention span was worse than a fly's. But I don't want to be noble, Luffy said, pouting. I want to be fierce, like Oyaji. Ace sighed, knowing that this argument would take all night. Luffy, knights have really cool swords. Luffy's eyes immediately turned into stars. Swords? Really? Nah, Ace, I want to be a knight. Then I can have a cool sword like Vista, right? The boy mimicked the swinging action. Different kind of sword, but the same idea, Ace said, running his hand through the boy's hair. He smiled once more at the woman. Could I get the knight costume too? If it's not too much trouble, I mean. No, it's perfectly fine, the woman said before disappearing behind the counter to fetch the costume. Ace looked at Luffy, who was practically vibrating in his seat, and said in an amused voice, You happy now? This is your first Halloween you're spending in a town, after all. Yeah, Luffy cheered, throwing his hands up in the air. Ace is best. She. Here you go. The woman reappeared and placed the styrofoam costume on the counter table. Is that all, sir? Yeah, Ace nodded and threw her a large bag of gold coins before she told him the price, which would have been a considerably smaller amount. He picked up Luffy and the two costumes and started walking out the door. Keep the change. The woman was too flustered to reply. Almost 2 hours later it was dark out. Lights loosely hung around the houses and gave the street an eerie glow. Luffy was running all over the place, demanding candy, with Ace and Thatch following closely behind. Marco was going to come, but Ace refused to let him leave his room unless he had on a pineapple costume on. Marco wasn't very happy, but at least Thatch had dressed up with him. He wore a bright polka-dotted clown suit and a matching wig. That was Vista's idea because Thatch had refused to mess with his hair at first. No one was sure why he chose a clown, but no one really cared either. Nah, Ace. Luffy ran up to him and tugged on his cape. How come the other kids have so much more candy than me? It's unfair. You had to go to more houses, Ace suggested. And be really cute while saying trick or treat. Not that the boy needed any help with the cute part. Luffy was just naturally adorable. Or go steal the other kids' candy. Thatch offered his own input to his pupil. Then take off running if they start to chase you. Really? The boy bounced around Thatch's leg, clearly happy. And they won't be mad? Kid, they'll all be utterly pissed. That's why you have to run fast. Think of it as training, alright? If you can outrun an angry mob of brats, I'll go buy you a very large bag of candy, K? Yes, Thatch did end up buying Luffy a very large bag of candy that night. But really, who expected anything else? Alright, brat. Atmos said as he carried the currently limp child around the deck. He dropped the boy to the ground, only for him to bounce right back up again. It's training time. Luffy tilted his head to the side. But I already did training today? Atmos grunted and ruffled the boy's hair. Different type of training. Today, you will learn something new, something strong. Really? Of course, Atmos grinned. Today, you will be learning hockey. Wow. Luffy looked amazed, barely containing his excitement in 6-year-old body. Hockey? Is that what Marco uses when he's like bam, and pow, and makes his fists all black and cool? It is, Atmos demonstrated, turning his entire arm black. Hockey is essential, especially when we go back to the New World. There are 3 types of hockey. Armament hockey, which is what I just showed you. This allows you to hit Logia devil fruit users, like Ace. I can hit Ace? Luffy said in excitement. Really? Yes, Atmos said. It is very satisfying. There is also observation hockey, which allows you to see others' attacks before they hit you. Those are the 2 types which you will be learning. What about the third? You said there was 3 types, right? I did, Atmos agreed in his loud, booming voice. But only certain people have the last type of hockey. King's hockey, Oyaji does, and so do Marco and Ace, but no one else. It's extremely powerful and very dangerous. Only the chosen ones have it, the conquerors. Luffy bounced between the large man's leg. That's so cool, I'll definitely have it. Atmos chuckled, we will see, brat. But for now, he paused and got into a fighting stance. Let's begin. Hey, Oyaji, Whitebeard looked down at his youngest son sitting on his lap. The boy was staring at the mast of the Moby, seemingly deep in thought. What's Clabberton? Wait, that's not right. Claberstein? Claberman? Clabouterman? The boy nodded with a grin, tearing his eyes away from the ship. Yeah, that Flamenco was telling stories about them the other day with his division and I didn't understand cause I didn't know what they were. It's a story all the old sailors used to tell to pass the time. Whitebeard laughed. The myth of the Clabouterman. What are they? Whitebeard smiled. That depends on who you ask. Some say they're water spirits that board ships. Others say they're the incarnation of a well-loved ship. They're said to warn their crew of danger and protect them. So, Whitebeard followed the boy's eyes as they drifted around the deck of the Moby. Does the Moby have one too? She's loved? I love the Moby? I don't know, Whitebeard said. I've seen many things on the Grand Line, but a Clabouternan is not one. I can't say if they exist or not. The boy visibly deflated at the news, clearly hoping for something else. Trying to cheer up his son, Whitebeard continued, though Roger swears he spoke to his ship, the Oro Jackson, once. Roger? The Pirate King? Yes, Whitebeard said. What was he like, Oyaji? You know, the Pirate King. Whitebeard turned to look out into the ocean, recalling memories from long ago. Goldie Roger. He was an interesting man. The first to make it to the end of the Grand Line. That man, he had a will like no other. Really, of course. Whitebeard laughed. To sail to Raftel, you have to. Have I ever told you of that one time? They really needed a miracle right now. Luffy, the small 6-year-old boy that they had been taking care of since age 4, was currently lying in one of those monotone hospital beds below the deck of the Moby. Ace hated it. He had never felt so helpless. Luffy was sick, pretty much dying, from a virus that has stumped even some of the smartest nurses and doctors of the ship. To everyone's horror, they had announced that there was a big possibility that Luffy would die. They couldn't help him. At first, Ace called bullshit. Luffy was their tiny baby brother who they couldn't seem to get to sit still. He was strong for his age, already showing signs of hockey at the tender age of 6. The child was as stubborn as a mule, maybe more. There was no way he'd die. Or so Ace believed. It wasn't until Ace had visited him for the 8th time within the week that he really grasped the situation. It was the first time that Ace considered the possibility that Luffy could very well die from this. Of course, he wasn't happy about this. None of the pirates were. Even the newbies that had barely known Luffy could sense the almost somber atmosphere. They probably noticed how the commanders and some crew members that Luffy is especially close to would crowd around the infirmary door from time to time when something would happen with Luffy. Though, most of the time it was never good news and only left everyone feeling worse than they already had. It had been almost 2 weeks since Luffy had been out of that stupid, white infirmary that smelled like alcohol. He didn't wake up often, maybe once a day for around 30 minutes and if they were lucky, an hour. The boy hadn't been feeling great before he was sent to the hospital, but at least he never collapsed on the deck before that. Now that he thought about it, Luffy had been showing a lot of signs before the virus really took over. Constantly complaining about headaches, not eating as much and not sleeping well at all. Oftentimes, Ace found himself with an extra body in his bed, trying to coax the boy into sleeping. Ace brought his hand up to his face, massaging the tense muscles. He needed to stop worrying. It wasn't like he could do anything. Things like this, like it or not, were beyond his control and he couldn't fix them with a little fire. In fact, when he had desperately suggested that, the nurses had banned him from the infirmary for almost 2 days. 2 agonizingly long days. He reached over the white bed that held Luffy and brushed his hand through the boy's soft hair, not minding the sweat that covered his fingers. Luffy looked horrible, breathing heavily and uneven, his face covered in sweat and his hand tightly gripping the white sheets like he was in a lot of pain. His body was unnaturally warm, an easy given when his temperature was over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The raven-haired child let out an involuntary whimper, his breathing hitched as he leaned towards Ace's hand. In contrast, Ace's hand felt like an ice cube compared to Luffy's burning forehead. With a small, sad smile, Ace brushed the hair out of Luffy's face. "Come on, Luffy. You can't drop yet. What happened to your adventure? I thought you were going to see the world with us? Come on. You have to beat this. Whatever it is. You can't let it win." We miss you, all of us." As usual, Luffy didn't respond. A click alerted the fire user of someone entering the room. He looked up from Luffy and glanced over his shoulder to see Marco standing in all of his glory, though he did look a little worse for wear. There were small bags under his eyes and his hair was sticking up in strange directions. Though, Ace probably looked about the same. Marco gave him a small smile that Ace didn't return. "How's he doing, Yoi?" Not looking up from Luffy, Ace replied, "I don't know, I'm not a doctor. Though, I think he's getting worse. His temperature seems to be increasing." Marco ran his hand through his blonde hair, signifying that he was just as frustrated and stressed as Ace was. After all, he was with Ace when they had saved the boy from that tiger so many years ago. Luffy was as close to Marco as he was to Thatch and Ace. A nostalgic smile slipped onto his face, thinking of the time when the boy had first opened his heart and gave the crew a try. He was timid, almost scared, back then, completely unlike the Luffy that they knew now. Their Luffy was loud, annoying and liked to talk. Things that Ace missed dearly. Marco hummed, putting a hand on Ace's shoulder and squeezing it. "He'll get better, Ace. Just believe." "Never though I'd hear you say that, Marco. What happened to logic?" Marco shrugged, taking his hand off of Ace's shoulder. "Logic doesn't involve our little brother anymore, does it? We need a miracle now, Yoi." He paused for a second. "But then again, miracles happen a lot with the Whitebeard pirates, right? After all, we got you to join. And become a commander. Who would have thought, Yoi?" Ace stood up with a sigh, though the smile was on his face. Oh, the memories. If someone told him back then that he'd joined someone else, he probably would have called them insane and throw them off his ship. But here he was, on the very boat that he had despised for a while, with friends and a little brother who always seemed to worry them for the stupidest reasons. This time, it was not a stupid reason. The fire user stretched his arms over his head as his stomach growled in protest. Oh, right. He had skipped breakfast this morning. And dinner that night. I guess. He snatched his hat from the chair and placed it on his head. Any other news? We're going to land on an island soon, Marco informed him, standing up as well. There are some doctors there that might be able to do something. The nurses think that this is our best shot if we're going to save Luffy. Oyaji has a friend on the island that would probably help him, Yoi. Ace opened the door with a small grin. Nothing in comparison to the grin that he normally gave everyone, but it was a start. Miracle indeed. Marco huffed, following Ace out the door. Only the best for our baby brother. She's insane, Thatch announced as they watched the supposed doctor of the island run all over her tiny little office that was somehow in the middle of a tree. The said doctor had just ran into the wall for the umpteenth time, laughing as she fell. I say we try the next island and look for someone who has some common sense left. Ace nodded next to him, but Namur just stood there, arms crossed, looking like a statue with a relatively pissed off face. The woman gave no indication of hearing the man, just getting up and dusting herself off and continuing to search for whatever she was searching for at the beginning, cackling hysterically every few seconds. The trio of commanders stood off towards the back, not sure what they were supposed to do. Poor Luffy was lying down on a bed that the doctor had set up with a blanket over his shaking shoulders. The doctor tore through her cabinets, literally throwing anything that wasn't what she needed over her shoulders and on the floor. Finally, she pulled out a bundle of thick leaves and chucked them on Luffy's stomach, igniting a groan from the boy. I say we take Luffy and run out the door. Ace agreed, watching with mild fascination and horror as the woman started tearing through her cabinets once more. I don't think she'll notice. No, Namur's voice was firm, yet there was a hint of annoyance. Luffy won't make it to the next island. Besides, she's supposed to be a world-renowned doctor and a friend of Oyaji. She's a world-renowned doctor? Thatch inquired, shooting the fishman an uncertain look. Huh? She's just a troll that lives in a tree. The male yelped as something came hurtling at his face, dodging it by mere centimeters. He looked at the offender with wide eyes, not really sure what to say. Just because I'm old doesn't mean I'm deaf, shithead. She snorted, flipping her gray hair over her shoulder and starting down Thatch with evil eyes. I'm only helping you because of Whitebeard. Let the forest animals take care of you for me. Another hair flip as she turned back to her work. Ace's eyes narrowed. We can handle animals just fine, Granny. Don't sass me, Young man. She threw a frying pan towards Ace's head, knowing full well that he'd just dodge it. Do you want me to fix your brat or not? That fishman's doing a good job. He's not criticizing how I work, be more like him. They both glanced at Namur before turning back to each other and shaking their heads in sync. Nah, they said together. We don't want to be a statue, thank you very much. TCH, the doctor huffed, turning her bony back to them and heading to the cabinet only to pull out an empty bottle and flick it, shaking her head. Damn, I thought I had more of this. She spun on her heels, looking at the three boys that were currently invading her house. I don't have the medicine to fix the brat. He's going to die. She shrugged, clearly not caring. Sorry. Ace had to bite his tongue to keep from screaming at her. Thatch was doing the same. Namur just looked at her with slightly narrowed eyes, hidden emotions swirling within them. What do you mean? You can't help him. His voice was low and dangerous, betraying his earlier facade. We specifically sought out you because we knew that you could help him. Were we wrong? The woman snorted. I could fix him, she said, almost defensively. But not without this. She waved the empty bottle in Namur's face, earning a grunt from the annoyed fishman. And what is that? Namur asked, his eyes narrowing even more. Ace took a careful step back, knowing that Namur doesn't have a temper like him, quick to flare to life and usually causes destruction. No, Namur's temper was deadly. It probably came from his shark ancestors, as Ace always liked to joke. Bioluminescence, she replied, taking the bottle out of Namur's face before you would break it. A kind that lives on this island. Only this island, and I'm out. Thatch poked his head around Namur's body. Why don't you just go outside and get some for us? The woman scoffed, throwing the bottle over her shoulder and not caring when it shattered against the floor. I thought I told you that there were dangerous animals out there. Besides, bioluminescences only show up at night. The darker it is outside, the more dangerous the animals are. There is no way in hell that you can send me in there, shitty boy. Cautiously, Ace peeked his head out from the other side of Namur's body. Quick question, what are those bioluni things? The woman glared at him. They are bioluminescences, moron. They are small animals that release a light from their body. Its uses for multiple purposes, such as catching prey, warding off predators and healing. Her eyes sparkled. A firefly is an example, but we can't use those. I need the ones that live in the water. Those will heal your brat. She hummed for a second. I guess you could get them for me if you wanted. Then I'd whip up something. She looked right into Ace's eyes, smirking. Didn't you say that the animals wouldn't be a problem for you? Ace huffed, coming out from behind Namur fully. We are Whitebeard commanders, Granny. If we couldn't handle animals then we wouldn't be here, now would we? You got spirit. I'll give you that. She ran her hand through her gray hair. Fine, you'll need a bottle. It's almost dark outside. They'll be in the river by the ocean on the other side of the forest. She took out a bottle from her backpack that was slung around her shoulders and tossed it to Thatch. There are two kinds of bioluminescences, the blue, which is pretty much everywhere, and the red, which is what I need. Only the red ones can heal the kid. Red, not blue. Got it. Thatch confirmed as they headed towards the door. We'll get them for you so you can help Luffy. The doctor hummed as she watched them walk out and continued to watch them before she disappeared. Then she turned to Luffy, seeking company. I wonder if I should have told them about that giant snake that guards the bioluminescences. She shrugged as Luffy whimpered in pain. Ah, you're right. I think they'll figure it out when they get there. She checked the child's temperature once more, frowning when the heat burned her hand. They better hurry. You only look like you have a few more hours until you kick the bucket, right? She cackled. Hopefully they'll get back in time. Digging through her sack, she pulled out a cloth and walked to the sink. She turned on the sink, enjoying the water as it washed her dirt-covered hands. Living in a tree was very harsh. It was only then did she notice the glowing red bottle tucked behind the paper towels. The woman chuckled, grabbing the bottle and examining it. She had completely forgot about the towel that was lying in the sink, dripping wet. I knew I didn't run out. She laughed, glancing at the door where the boys had left. I wonder if I should go and tell them. She laughed once more. Nah, I think I'll make this a surprise. Tree. 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 Oh look, a bush. Where were the animals that the old granny had warned them about? So far, Ace hadn't seen anything out of the ordinary. The fire user suppressed a snort. That lady was a fruitcake, nothing out of the ordinary. People were strange in the new world all the time. Yet, that lady was the only one who knew how to save Luffy. They would save Luffy. No matter what. Ace, you're going to set the forest on fire. Thatch said, sounding like he didn't care that much. Ace blinked and glanced down at his hands, which were, in fact, on fire. He shook them a few times to extinguish the flames and ran his hands through his hair, trying not to let his worry show on his face. Sorry, he said, and Thatch's eyes softened. The older man placed a hand on his shoulder, giving it a comforting squeeze. He opened his mouth, talking in almost a whisper. We'll find those luminescents, Ace. Luffy isn't going to die today. Right. Ace gripped the handle of his knife until his knuckles turned white. He'll die tomorrow if we don't find anything. Thatch whistled. Damn, I never knew that you were this pessimistic. I'm not. Ace argued. I'm just worried about Luffy. Namur finished the sentence for him. We all are. He's our little brother, right? As older ones, we have a right to be worried. Actually, I was more worried about leaving him alone with that crazy grandma, but I'm worried about that too. Yeah, you're right. We need to get Oyaji some new friends. Damn it, Ace muttered, looking at the black waters below him. It was well past sunset now, probably around 5 hours since they set out. They were on the other side of the island, where the bioluminescent were supposed to be. I thought they were supposed to be here. Yet, all they saw was a clear river with nothing in it, nothing at all. Are you sure this is the right place? Ace continued, tilting his head to the side. I mean, look, there's nothing. Thatch frowned at the water while Namur only looked thoughtful. Yeah, this is the place. I don't know about the bioluminescent, though. I'm not an expert. Namur? The fish man tore his eyes from the water to look at his friend. Yeah? Any ideas? Thatch asked him. The fish man didn't do anything for a second, but then he nodded, stepping up to the river's edge. There's something in the water, though you can't see them. He smiled a bit and faced the water before bending down. Watch. He thrust his hand into the water and the other two commanders stared in fascination as the whole river lit up in a beautiful blue color. Wow, Ace said, his eyes following the trail of blue that went on for as far as he could see. They're amazing. They'll only show themselves if disturbed, Namur said, smiling a little as he scooped out a handful of water. You can't see them because they're extremely tiny creatures. He threw the water back in the river. There are billions of them here. Maybe more. Thatch frowned, looking up and down the river. This is great and all, but didn't the Ledred ones? These are blue. Ace's eyes widened and he quickly nodded. Yeah, she did say that. Follow the river then, Namur suggested. Maybe the red ones like salt water better. The red bioluminescent did like the ocean better, as Ace, Thatch and Namur found out. They were all over the coast, lighting up every time a wave crashed against the beach. There they are, Ace said happily, running towards the ocean at full speed. Oi, Thatch, toss me the bottle. Thatch smacked him on the head before he handed the bottle to his best friend. Don't beak it, it's the only one we have. An image of Luffy in his sick bed flashed across Ace's mind before disappearing. Ace sat on the coast, not minding when the water came up and brushed his legs, splattering the small, red animals all over his legs. Luffy. He would have loved to see this. The boy probably would have been running up and down the beach, laughing without a care in the world. He would have screamed in joy when the water touched his feet. He would have talked everyone's ear off as soon as he got back to the ship and everyone would have smiled and laughed because it was Luffy. Ace missed his little brother. They all did. Ace, we have to hurry, Thatch said, smiling. Luffy needs us, right? Let's get back to him as soon as possible. Ace nodded and scooped up some seawater filled with the bioluminescent. He watched as the tiny creature swam around in the container before he capped the bottle and stuffed it on his belt. Suddenly, Namur came running over, panting heavily. We need to go, now. Why? Thatch questioned, seeing no reason for such urgency. Luffy was sick, yes, but Namur wouldn't get that wound up by that reason. A roar answered their question as all of them whipped around towards the sound. You've got to be kidding me, Ace said, mouth dropping. Standing in front of them looked like a dragon, except no wings or legs. It had beautiful black scales that reflected in the moonlight and two deadly, red eyes that glowed just as bright as the luminescent. It stood over 30 feet high, its body length was well past 60. "That is a big snake," Thatch commented, but his words came out more as a squeak. "I think I know why we need to leave, Namur. Sorry for doubting you." Namur shot him a look that clearly aid. "You're thinking about that right now?" Realization dawned on Ace at that moment. That snake is the only thing that's standing in the way Luffy and his antidote. Fire roared around Ace for a moment before he got it under control and glared fiercely at the animals. Nothing stood in his way. Nothing. Almost an hour later, Thatch found himself slightly burned and bruised but overall fine and running through the woods trying to find the old woman's hut. It was a tree, right? That didn't really help much, considering that there were a lot of trees in the forest, but at least they had a general direction. Ace, as Thatch noticed, was still smoking and muttering threatening things under his breath. The snake was a lot tougher than any of them imagined. Its scales deflected a lot of Ace's flames, but that only seemed to anger the fire user even more, and soon it was just a one-on-one with fire versus scales. Eventually, Ace had beaten it with a knife to the eye, but it did take longer than any of them wanted. The morning rays were already peeking over the treetops, casting shadows that danced almost happily. They didn't have much time left. "Hey," Namur said, pointing in front of them. He had a hand over his eyes, shielding the sun from them. "Isn't that the tree?" "Ah, it is," Ace shouted happily. "'Bout time," Thatch grinned, rubbing his hands together in anticipation. "Luffy, wait for us." They sprinted at top speed and burst through the doors, startling the doctor. She jumped up, spinning around with what looked like a dagger in her hand. Her eyes were glowing. Was that normal? But she seemed to recognize them and her eyes stopped glowing, returning to their original murky white color. The woman eyed them for a second and crossed her arms. "What took you so long? It's already too late for you to save him." "No, no, 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 no." "What?" they all yelled out, worry and fear bubbling in their stomachs. They were too late? That meant that Luffy. But the woman continued, ignoring their outburst completely, and looked around her room. "I found the extra luminescence that I was talking about and I didn't feel like waiting for you, so I went ahead and healed him." Ace. Suddenly Ace was flung to the ground by a small body that he recognized well. Two arms repeatedly wrapped around his torso and a small head was stuffed in his chest. Ace grinned widely and hugged the boy back, holding back the tears that threatened to fall. "Luffy." The head detached itself from his chest and the 6-year-old offered a giant grin. Though, it wasn't at the level that it normally was, but was still a start from where Luffy was lying in bed a few hours ago, unable to move. "I'm okay now. I wasn't before and it hurt whenever I moved and I was scared, but then that lady stuffed this yucky stuff down my throat and forced me to swallow it and I'm okay now. She said that you were out fighting monsters and that you'd be back soon." The boy sat up on his chest, grinning like an idiot. "So, did you win?" Ace grinned, picking the boy off from his chest and standing up. He didn't put Luffy on the ground though, instead the said boy hung from his shoulders, smiling happily. "Of course I beat the monster. Knife right to the eye. He won't be bothering us anymore, will he?" Luffy giggled in response, his bangs hanging in his face. "Oi, oi, aren't you forgetting us?" Luffy's grin brightened even more and he jumped off Ace's shoulders before the fire user could protest, hugging Thatch's and Namur's leg. "Thatch, Namur." Thatch bent down and ruffled the boy's hair, laughing. "You gave us a scare there, Luffy. We really thought that you were a goner." Luffy hummed, putting his own hand in Thatch's. "I'm not going to die like that. I'm still tiny. I want to grow up and see the world with you guys." Namur grinned, scooping the child in his arms. "Well, we want to see the world with you too." Luffy laughed, wrapping his arms around Namur's neck. "I'm hungry." All right. The doctor interrupted their small reunion. "I fixed him, now get out of my house, I have stuff to attend to. Like sleeping. And trying to get all these mushy thoughts out of my head." Ace grinned and bowed at her, something that he didn't do often. "Thank you for saving our little brother." The woman's eyes softened for a fraction of a second before they hardened again. Yeah. Get out. Don't you have that holiday to celebrate? Christmas was it?" That's when they realized the date. December 18th, a week until Christmas. "Well, isn't that perfect? Oyaji." Luffy came running up on deck, weaving in between people's feet as he tried to get to Whitebeard's chair. It had been almost a week since they had left the island and Luffy was still recovering, but other than that, they were all doing great. The boy still got dizzy and would sometimes complain about a headache, but at least he wasn't bedridden like before. Luffy stumbled for a second as he struggled to regain his balance. He was clutching something red and white to his chest as he continued to run across the deck and stopped in front of Whitebeard's chair. "Oyaji," he chirped, holding out the red cloth. "Oyaji needs to wear the Santa hat." Whitebeard took the child and placed him on his lap, gently running his giant fingers through the child's soft hair. Marco, who was walking by, looked up at the two with an amused expression. "Why does he need to wear that, Luffy?" The child giggled, practically radiating in joy. "'Cause he's already got the beard. Now he just needs the hat. Oyaji can replace Santa this year." One of the Whitebeard pirates laughed, used to the child's antics by now. "You're going to scare a lot of children, Luffy. Maybe give some moms a heart attack." Ace decided to join in the conversation by adding his own impas, a mustache, not a beard. Luffy stuck his tongue out at them, signifying that he didn't really care and turned back to Oyaji. "Please? Just for today?" Whitebeard knew that he had lost, but thought he'd tease the child a bit more. What if someone attacks the ship? "Santa Whitebeard," was the immediate response. Leaning over to Marco, Ace whispered, "Did that make any sense to you?" Marco simply shrugged and laughed. "Fine, brat. I'll wear it, but just for today, alright?" Whitebeard said with a smile, taking the hat from the 6-year-old's hand. He placed it on his head so it covered up his bald spot and the tip of it hung in his face. "Satisfied?" Luffy hummed. "I think you need to find a suit and put that on too." He looked up at his father figure and grinned happily. "A suit, huh?" Whitebeard asked, laughing. "I don't think there's a suit big enough for a man like me, brat." "Izo can make one." "Hell no," the cross-dresser yelled, crossing his arms on his chest. "Besides, that takes time. I don't have that time." Luffy whirled around, giving the cross-dresser his best puppy dog face. "Please, Izo, I really want Oyaji to be Santa. I'll make it up to you, I swear." Izo narrowed his eyes for a second before sighing and running his hands through his long, black hair. "Brat, you can kill someone with those eyes." The boy tilted his head to the side. "I can?" Rolling his eyes, Izo smirked. "Never mind, Luffy. Just give me a few hours, I'll have it done by tonight. Christmas Eve." Whitebeard's new plan, Marines confused. All of the Whitebeard pirates were howling in laughter as they read through the newest newspaper article 2 mornings after. There was a picture of Oyaji, dressed as Santa, along with Marco who had reindeer horns on and a bright red clown nose. Marco looked over Ace's shoulder and scowled at the picture. "I look completely ridiculous. How did Luffy talk me into that again?" "He's a very manipulative 6-year-old, Ace said with an easy grin, shooting the youth beside him a proud look. "We're trained him well." Said boy looked up at Ace, not understanding what they found so funny about the picture. "What's manipulative?" Ace stood up from the table in the dining hall and ruffled the boy's hair. "Doesn't matter, buddy." Luffy blinked a moment before he turned back to his meal and continued to stuff his face. Ace walked to the back of the gallery and leaned against the wall next to Thatch. "He really grows up fast, doesn't he?" Thatch laughed. "Don't they all? I wonder what the future has in store for our little brother," Marshal D. Teach said, laughing as well as he walked up to the other commanders. "I bet it'll be interesting." They all agreed, but no one seemed to notice the strange glint in the fat man's eyes. No one except for Luffy, that is. "I lost him," Ace cried, clinging onto Rikuyo's leg. Rikuyo frowned at him, shaking his leg as if he wanted the 2nd Division commander to get off. Ace only held on tighter, fake sobs coming from his mouth. "How can I lose him? I'm so stupid." "We realized that a while ago, Ace," Rikuyo muttered, rolling his eyes. His weapon whimpered, looking at Ace that was currently on her master's leg. "But this is kind of ridiculous. Care to tell what's going on?" Luffy disappeared. He yelled, gritting his teeth and standing back up, brushing the dust from his legs. He glanced at the direction that the Moby was anchored, then at the town that was in the opposite direction. He just disappeared. "Damn it. I just looked away for a second and he was gone." Rikuyo sighed, bringing his hand up to massage his temples. It wasn't that surprising that Luffy would run off. It's happened a lot. They really needed to break that habit before he got himself hurt. But the fact that this was an island for pirates was quite worrisome. There was no doubt that Luffy was lost, possibly wandering the town hopelessly, and they really couldn't count on him finding his way back. The kid had a horrible sense of direction. His weapon looked up at him, her powerful jaw clicking together in a concerned tone. He brushed his hand over her spikes, thinking of how they could solve this problem without tearing up the town to look for him. He sighed again. This was going to be harder than he thought. They might have to get Marco to search from the sky while Haruta searched from the ground. She was fast and extremely observant, so it shouldn't be too much of a problem for her. "What do you want me to do?" Rikuyo asked, running his hand through his dreadlocks. The 7th Division commander wasn't a babysitter. "Why didn't you just get Marco? He might help." Ace visibly paled at the thought of the phoenix. No, if Marco found out he would kill me. Like, tear off every limb slowly and chuck me into the ocean. Plus, he probably wouldn't talk to me for weeks. Weeks, Rikuyo. He'd glare at me every change he gets. Do you know how fucking scary he can be? Rikuyo rolled his eyes, but he did understand Ace's expense a bit more. Marco wasn't someone to be taken lightly, especially around Luffy. The Phoenix was a huge softie for the kid. Hell, they all were. But it wasn't like he would ever admit that. "I can't do much either," he reminded the fire user. "Maybe Thatch could help you. Curiel might be free." Ace gave him a dull glare. "You aren't busy, you're just walking on the beach." The fire user paused and took a huge breath, running his hand through his dark hair. "Couldn't you, I don't know, have your weapon sniff Luffy out or something? I'm getting pretty desperate here." Rikuyo's weapon looked at him, letting out a bark much like that of a dog. "Oi, oi. She's meant for battle, not looking for kids. I don't even know if she can smell, but I can help you look." Ace looked at him hopefully. "For a price," he added. "Rikuyo." The fire user whined, giving the man his best-kicked puppy dog face. The man rolled his eyes. "It'll be a small favor, don't you want help?" Ace sent him a dull glare. "He's your little brother too." "You're right," Rikuyo agreed. "He is, but I know he can take care of himself just fine. I'm not going to baby him like you, Marco and Thatch do." "He's 7. He's a whitebeard pirate," Rikuyo snapped. "We've been training him since he's 4. He already know a bit of hockey and he can take care of himself. The kid isn't someone you should underestimate." "I know that." Ace threw him hands up in the air. "I helped raise him with everyone else. But Luffy can't even control his devil fruit yet. Hockey or not, it won't do any good if he just hits himself. Plus, there are supposed to be some super rookies on this island, along with a Yonko. He might be strong, but he can't go up against someone like that." Rikuyo's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "A Yonko? Which one? Alright, maybe he should let Ace get off easy." After all, the fire user was right. Luffy was strong, but he couldn't go up against super rookies and Yonkos. Maybe in the future, but not at the moment. He still had a lot to learn. Ace shrugged. "I don't know. Pops sent some people out to go and check, but last time I was on the ship, they were still out. A Yonko is still a Yonko. They're dangerous, even to Pops. Remember last time Kadio attacked us?" Rikuyo shook his head, remembering the attack clearly. Yeah, it's hard to forget. After all, they nearly blew up the Moby. Luffy hadn't been with them at the time, thank God, and they suffered a lot of casualties. He rolled his shoulders when his weapon clicked its metal teeth together. "Alright, let's go. We have a 7-year-old to find." Luffy was lost. Okay. It wasn't the first time he'd been lost, but he didn't like this town. At all. So far, for around the hour that he'd been here, he'd seen 7 people get shot. Not that bullets bothered him much anyways. 3 get stabbed, a little bit more worrisome, but he still wasn't panicking, and a few other dead people in the back of the alleys that he'd checked. He was in a not-so-friendly town and he wanted out of it. He missed Ace. But then again, if Ace found him, the fire user would probably kill him. Though, to be fair, that butterfly was pretty interesting. He hummed to himself, kicking a stray rock as he skipped through the town. The townspeople were looking at him funny. Did he do something wrong? Instead of getting mad, he just smiled at them, hoping to make them happier. Luffy continued on, looking all around the town hoping to find his family. He probably could have asked someone for directions, but he didn't feel like getting stabbed today. Honestly, He wanted to stay away from the people of this town as much as he could. Ha! And Ace called him stupid. Oi, you! A rather high-pitched voice called from behind him. The short kid with the black hair? Oi! Stop! Luffy blinked for a moment before turning around only to come face to face with a boy around 2 years older than him that happened to be much, much bigger than he was. The boy marched up to him, grinning like a maniac. Only then did Luffy notice the other 2 boys. A bit younger than the first one, behind the boy that was approaching him. They were laughing, a dark gleam in their eyes. The oldest reached him and stood over him in a threatening manner. He looked like a really big hippo. What's a little kid like you doing out here in our town? Where's your mama, brat? Luffy blinked before smiling at the boy. I'm pretty sure Marco is still on the ship. Well, he technically didn't have a mom, but Ace kept calling Marco a mother hen, so that had to count for something, right? Are you stupid or something? The boy asked him harshly, looking for a reaction that Luffy wouldn't give him. They were just bullies. Luffy had dealt with bullies for a long time. Luffy hummed, still smiling. He really should find Ace. The oldest boy snorted, nudging one of his cronies. The crony looked confused at first, then awkwardly laughed with the oldest boy. Ain't that cute, eh? We've got another dumbass in this world that we should take care of before the adults get him. The crony on the left grinned devilishly. Now hold still, brat. This'll only hurt a lot. The oldest quickly unsheathed the knife that was hidden under his clothes and charged at Luffy, who was slowly losing his smile. A small yelp escaped his lips as the boy stabbed down, dodging it hastily. What are you doing? Luffy cried out as he jumped out of the way of the knife again. Hey! Stop that! Knifes hurt. I hope so, the boy cackled, his bright blue eyes darkening with malice. He looked over his shoulder and nodded to his cronies. They grinned and rushed at Luffy, trying to grab his arms. Luffy knew that he couldn't use his devil fruit. He was still learning to control it. The most that he could probably do was hit one of the boys in the face and then himself. Plus, Ace had told him not to cause trouble. HLD be considered trouble. He didn't notice the other boy that had managed to sneak up behind him until his fat arm wrapped around his neck, cutting off his air supply. On instinct, Luffy grabbed his arm, trying to tug him off. Hey, let me go. He started kicking and struggling, but it didn't seem to do any good. Quit struggling. The boy holding him snapped, applying more pressure to the rubber boy's neck. The oldest boy started stalking towards him, knife in front. In one swift movement, the boy stabbed Luffy under his left eyes, laughing when Luffy screamed. Blood began to drip down his face as tears formed in the corner of his eyes. This place, Luffy decided, was defiantly not his favorite island. The older boy yanked the knife out of his eye harshly, and not a second later the knife was embedded into his stomach. Luffy thought he cried out Ace's name, but he wasn't sure. The pain was agonizing. Little boys shouldn't be out on the street all alone, you know. The boy whispered and he pressed the knife harder. Luffy closed his eyes, holding in a whimper. He needed to stay strong. But the world was starting to go black and his knees were shaking. Luffy didn't know how much longer he could stay awake. The knife was pulled out once again, prepared to strike, but before it reached its destination, a new voice entered Luffy's hearing. Oi! You! Leave the kid alone. Luffy cracked his eyes open, only seeing blurry shapes. However, he did notice that the boy seemed to be backing up, staring at the new figure. Ace? But it wasn't his brother, it wasn't any of his brothers. Shit. The boy that attacked him cursed, backing away some more. Let the brat go. We need to get out of here now. The arms around Luffy's neck disappeared, leaving the 7-year-old boy to stand on his own, gasping for air. With a pained cry, his knees gave out, falling towards the cold, hard ground. Another arm wrapped around his waist, mindful of the bleeding wound in his stomach. The small boy was pulled into a strong chest. He thought he heard a sign and a hand ghosted over his hair. Better get you fixed up, huh? Luffy opened his eyes a bit, glancing at his savior. All he could see was vibrant red hair and a bright yellow straw hat that sat atop of his head. The light stung his eyes and he shut them once more, this time allowing himself to embrace the darkness, falling limp in the kind stranger's arms. The first thing that Luffy noticed when he got up was it was hot. He wanted to throw the sheets that were spread over his small body. The second thing he noticed was this wasn't his bed, This wasn't the Moby. His eyes promptly snapped open with a startled cry, sitting up in the bed and scaring the man that was beside him. The man, Luffy noticed it was the one that saved him before, flailed around in his chair for a second before falling down on the wooden deck. He sat up, rubbing his head, grumbling under his breath. Geez, kids and their loud noises. He didn't seem to notice the 7-year-old starting at him, mouth slightly agape. The man let out a loud yawn, stretching his arms above his head. He blinked at Luffy once before offering a grin and stood up. So, you're finally up, huh? He chuckled. Good. I thought you died there for a second. So, what's your name? He bent down, starting Luffy in the eyes. Finding his voice, the boy quickly answered, I'm Luffy. The stranger ruffled his hair and stood up. Luffy, eh? I'm Shanks. Nice to meet ya. Shanks hummed to himself, before standing up fully, looking around the room. I guess I need to get the doctor to look at you. He sighed, looking back at the boy in the bed. Stay, all right? Don't leave that bed until I get back. With that, he opened the door and left. Luffy blinked, allowing his emotions to surface. He was scared, confused, and his stomach hurt like a bitch. All he wanted was someone he knew. Like Oyaji. Oyaji would always tell him stories whenever he was stressed or scared. He wanted to go home. Whimpering, he laid back down, pulling the covers over his head. Maybe if he pretended that he was home, he would feel better. But no matter how hard he tried to convince himself that everything was fine, he couldn't fight the truth. He was alone, scared, lost and hungry. Not a second later, the door slammed open and Luffy cautiously peeked his head from beneath the covers. His black hair hung in his eyes as he gripped the white sheets harder. Shanks was there along with a man that Luffy didn't recognize. He assumed that the other man was the doctor. The patient is finally up, the doctor mused, setting a bottle of clear liquid on his desk. He walked over to Luffy's bed and placed a cool hand over Luffy's forehead. Luffy flinched at the touch, but didn't comment. You still have a fever, though it's part of the healing process. Shouldn't be too bad considering how deadly the poison was. Luffy tilted his head to the side cutely. Poison? Shanks hummed, sitting on the edge of the bed. Ah, poison. Apparently the knife that the boy had was coated with some sort of poison. I don't know much about it, but apparently it was pretty dangerous. Should have killed a boy your age in seconds, the doctor added, going back to shuffling his stuff. Luffy looked at him, puffing out his cheeks slightly. A little poison wouldn't kill him. Besides, he was pretty sure that Fose's food was more toxic than a little bit of poison. Now tell me, Shanks brought his attention from the doctor to him. Why were you out there all alone? I can tell you don't live on this island? Luffy rubbed his face, frowning when he felt a bandage under his eye. I got separated from my brother and then I got lost. He yawned, trying to shake off the tiredness that was threatening to overwhelm him. Nay, how long have I been asleep? About 2 days, Shanks answered. The doctor was surprised that you weren't out even longer. The color drained from Luffy's face. Oyaji would be really worried by now. And Ace. He shivered just by thinking about it. He would be lucky if Ace wasn't ravishing the whole village to the ground by now. He could be pretty protective. Something wrong, kid? Shanks asked, something akin to worry lining his face. I have to go, Luffy yelped, jumping out of the bed and darting towards the door. A hand reached out and grabbed the back of his shirt, stopping him in his tracks. He thrashed around, ignoring the burning pain from his wound. Let me go, I need to go. Luffy felt his feet leave the ground as he was pulled up in front of a face. He stared into the doctor's emotionless eyes defiantly. You won't be going anywhere until you heal, brat. He set Luffy back on the bed and guarded the door to make sure that the boy didn't try to escape again. I have to go, Luffy whinnied, trying to jump off the bed only to be stopped by Shanks, who simply shook his head. They'll be worried. No, the doctor replied harshly. They can wait a week for you to heal. I'm certain that they wouldn't want their little brother coming back injured, Luffy bit his bottom lip, trying to keep in the tears and hide his trembling fingers. Why wouldn't they let him see his family? He missed them. He should have never chased after that butterfly in the first place. But no buts, the doctor glared at his stubborn patient. You will stay on this ship until you heal. He turned to Shanks. Make sure the brat stays in this room and doesn't get out of that bed. With that, he made his leave. Shanks sighed, running his hand through his red hair. Sorry, Luffy. I guess you'll be staying with us for a while, right? Luffy shook his head, whipping the tears that were threatening to fall from his face. I need to get back. I can't stay. Shanks gave him a look. Doctor said you couldn't leave. He sighed once again when the boy shook his head frantically. So you said you aren't from here. Are you a marine brat? Or just a passing sailor? Luffy frowned, looking down at the white sheets. I'm not a marine. I'm a pirate. Shanks stared at the boy for a second, judging Wearius. Once he realized that the boy was, in fact, completely serious, he promptly burst out laughing. Luffy stared at him for a second, startled by his reaction. You? A pirate? You're too small? That seemed to get the boy riled up. His dark eyes narrowed at the offender, hands clenching into tight balls. I am not. Don't make fun of me. Shanks just continued to laugh. Stop laughing, it ain't funny, bastard. Sorry, Shanks wheezed out. Just didn't think I'd ever met a kid that was your age playing pirate. I'm not playing. Luffy threw his hands up in the air, desperately trying to get the man to understand. I'm a real pirate. Shanks coughed into his hand, still grinning. Alright. Calm down. The doctor will skin me alive if you pop your stitches. He gently pushed the boy back onto the bed. You're probably tired, right? You should sleep some more. I'm not tired, bastard. Luffy weakly struggled in his grasp. Shanks knew better though, the boy's dropping eyes were a plain sign that the boy was indeed tired. Come on kid, sleep. You'll heal faster and you can go home to your family quicker. Shanks tired to bribe the boy. Thankfully, it worked. The boy's eyes lit up in a way that Shanks hadn't seen in a long time. Really? If I sleep, I can see them faster? Shanks chuckled. Yeah, if you sleep you can see them faster. He removed his hand from the boy's shoulder and watched as he buried his head into the plain, white pillow. The red-haired man stood up, taking his leave. He had a lot to think about. So, Shanks turned to the newest passenger on the Red Force. You said you were a pirate, right? They were sitting out on deck, with Doctor's permission of course, watching the waves as they slashed against the hull. On the other side of the ship, they could hear the people of the town just starting to go around their daily rounds. It had been almost 4 days since Shanks had found Luffy and he had to say that Luffy was getting along with the crew just nicely. He wasn't even scared when Shanks told him that they were pirates. In fact, he seemed more exited. Ah, Luffy replied, lying on deck and staring up at the sky. Yeah. Why do you become a pirate? Shanks asked, tearing his eyes away from the 7-year-old who was sprawled out on deck. Luffy seemed to think about this for a second. When I was really small, my family saved me. Family, huh? Shanks mused, staring at his own family who were busying themselves on the ship. He didn't really think that there were other pirate crews out there besides him and Whitebeard who really considered themselves a family. Is there another reason? A grin stretched across the young boy's face. Something that Shanks hadn't seen since he sailed with Roger. Freedom, he answered. I just want to be free. Shanks grinned in response, fiddling with his straw hat. His treasure. And being a pirate makes you free? Luffy hummed, closing his eyes. Oyaji once told me about someone called the Pirate King. Shanks fought a goofy grin off his face. Oh yeah? What did he say about him? He said that the Pirate King had the most freedom in the world. Luffy giggled. A lot of people thought of him as a monster, but Oyaji liked him. You want to be Pirate King? Shanks asked, crossing his arms over his chest. He would not admit that he was getting somewhat attached to this boy. Said boy simply shook his head. Oyaji'll be Pirate King, he said without a shred of doubt in his voice. The Pirate King might have the most freedom in the world, but I already have all the freedom that I want. He paused for a second. And I have a family. I'm not alone anymore. Is that so? Shanks gave a ghost of a smile. You're a special little boy, you know that? The laugh afterwards told Shanks all he needed to know. You miss your family, brat? Ben Beckman said, plopping down next to Luffy. It was rare to see the kid alone. Most of the time he was either in the infirmary or clinging to Shanks' legs, listening to one of his stories. Luffy blinked, offering a grin to his visitor, though Ben noticed how it was a bit forced. Yeah. Are you feeling any better? The man continued to question. Luffy gave him another fake grin. Yep, my stomach isn't hurting anymore. Ben's eyes narrowed, knowing well that Luffy desperately wanted to see his family again. don't lie to me." The grin faded and the boy looked up at him with innocent confusion. "What did you mean?" A bottom lip protruded out, his entire face forming into a pout. Instead of answering, Ben reached over Luffy and lightly poked his wound. The reaction was immediate. Luffy yelped in pain, curling into a ball while desperately grasping at his wound. "Isn't hurting anymore, huh?" Ben carefully picked the boy up, holding him bridal style until his pain subsisted. Luffy groaned into his chest. "That was dirty. We're just trying to help, kid." "You have a devil fruit?" Shanks asked while pulling on Luffy's face. It stretched, making Shanks grin. Luffy started to whine and swat at the offending hand. "Rubber?" Luffy nodded while trying to pry the older man off of his face. Shanks responded by simply lifting him up, laughing when the boy gave out a startled yelp. "Let me go. Quit playing with my face." When Shanks didn't stop, Luffy started aiming kicks at his balls. Shanks laughed, dodging Luffy's futile escape strategies. "So you sink when you hit the water?" He pulled Luffy to be eye level with him. Flashing a grin, Shanks pulled the younger's nose. "I'm going to start calling you Anchor from now on." "Oi, Shanks." He flailed his arms around, pouting, "Meanie." Shanks set the boy on the ground, playfully ruffling his hair. "Come on, Anchor, you love me." Luffy puffed his cheeks out like the little kid he was and turned around while crossing his arms. "No, I don't." Shanks snorted. "You've got a lot of spunk for a little kid." He stood up, ruffling the boy's hair once more before heading to his cabin. "Stay out of trouble." "Okay. I have to work." He glanced over his shoulder. "That means no going off this boat." The 7-year-old glared in return. "Where do you think he is?" Ace whispered, staring out at the ocean. The moon reflected across the water, making an eerie appearance. "It's been almost 2 weeks now. Do you think something happened?" His friend, Thatch, rolled his eyes though his worry was evident on his face as well. "Obviously. Luffy wouldn't just run off. We know that." "What do you think happened?" Ace asked, pushing himself from the railing. He looked up at the starless sky, running his hands through his hair. "Where is he now?" Thatch patted him on the back. "If I knew that, he'd be here by now, don't you think?" When Ace didn't respond, the older male gave an exasperated sigh. "Ace, you really should sleep. It's been a while since you've had any rest." "I have watch tonight," the younger male muttered. "Besides, I'll be the first to know if anything changes." In the middle of the night, Thatch snorted. "Sorry, buddy, but I highly doubt that anything will change." "Commander Thatch is right, Commander Ace," a deep voice boomed. Ace looked over his shoulder to see one of his division members, Teach, looking at him with hard eyes. "I can take your watch duty tonight." Ace waved his hand in the air, trying to keep a yawn in. No, I've got it, Teach. You can go back to bed." "He's not going to get here faster by you just standing out here," Teach said, voice full of authority. "And he definitely wouldn't like the fact that you're depriving yourself of your daily needs." Ace winced at the words, knowing that Luffy would suspect something. He might act obtuse most of the time, but he knew when his friends were hurt, especially Ace. Ace could never lie in front of the boy no matter how hard he tired since his little brother could read him so well. "All right," Ace grumbled. "Fine. I'll try and sleep. I'll get tomorrow's watch." "That's Marco's watch time." Thatch blinked before grinning. "Good luck with that." "Shut up, Thatch. You know, yacht Luffy one day in the gallery. I have a boy your age." Luffy blinked and looked up at the sharpshooter. "Really?" "Ah," Yasopp said, letting out a light laugh. "I haven't seen him or my wife since he was a baby." "Do you visit them?" Luffy asked, exited to know about kids his age. Being with the Whitebeard pirates was great, but most of them were at least 20 years older than him. He never really knew what it was like to have a friend his age. Yasopp shook his head. "I haven't seen them since I left. The sea was calling, you know. It's not like you can ignore her call. I might miss them, but I don't regret leaving." "Nah, can you tell me about him?" Luffy didn't understand why the pirates around him groaned, including Shanks. Yasopp laughed, rustling his hair. "Of course I can, brat. Maybe one day you'll meet him." And with that, Yasopp stared going into detail about everything he knew about his son that he had barely met. 3 hours later and Luffy was starting to understand why everyone else looked so frustrated. Luffy. Poke. Luffy. Poke. Luffy. Poke. Luffy. Luffy blinked, shaking his head to clear his thoughts. He looked up to see the red-haired man sigh in exasperation. Huh? Shanks grinned, showing off his white teeth. He plopped beside the 7-year-old, almost laughing at Luffy's dumbfounded face. I've been calling you for about 5 minutes now. You're dead to the world. He grinned dropped a bit. I wanted to know about your family. Maybe we could find them. The doctor said that you could go home tomorrow. A joyful grin spread across Luffy's small face and his eyes sparkled. He stood up, grabbing Shanks' knee and bouncing up and down. Really? Really? I can see them tomorrow? Shanks laughed, though he knew that he'd miss the brat once he left. Chances of ever meeting again were slim. Especially since he was an exclusive Yonko, most ships tended to stay away from them. For fear of their life and all. Calm down, Anchor. The boy stopped jumping, though he was practically shaking in excitement. Shanks refused to think of him as cute and he was certainly not getting attached. What can you tell me about them? Luffy giggled. Well, Ace likes that call Marco a pineapple cuz his hair is in a pineapple shape. Huh. That kind of sounded like Marco the Phoenix from Whitebeard's crew. Ace likes to set things on fire. Fire Fist Ace. Huh. No way. Thatch is a really good cook, he chirped out happily. And Foss. Hey Anchor, Shanks said, trying to swallow the lump in his throat. Could this kid be a part of his crew? No, impossible. Whitebeard knew better than to take in a child, it was too dangerous. Yeah? Luffy tilted his head to the side, still grinning. Could you tell me your captain's name? Luffy hummed for a second. I think I heard a guy the other day shout something like, Newgate, but I don't know. I just call him Oyaji. The 7-year-old sat down in front of him again. But he's really, really big. He spread his arms out wide as if demonstrating. And he's got this white banana-looking mustache. Luffy giggled. Stefan had one too. Shanks's mouth dropped open. Is his name Edward Newgate? Luffy shook his head, confused. Whitebeard? That seemed to ring a bell. The grin slipped back onto place and he nodded enthusiastically. Uh-huh. We're the Whitebeard Pirates. Luffy, please tell me that's a joke. Know why? You've got to be kidding me, Shanks yelped, staring at the child in front of him. Did he really take one of Whitebeard's children away from the man? Damn it, when they bring the brat back, all hell is going to break loose. Shanks? The 7-year-old sounded worried. Shanks? What's wrong? You sound like you don't like Oyaji. Shanks rubbed his temples, thinking of ways to keep his head on his shoulders. He's not on my favorite people list. I guess you could call me my friend. Though, he's more of a drinking buddy. Shanks smirked. I don't think he likes me very much. The boy questioned, like he couldn't understand why they didn't get along. Suddenly, Luffy's eyes sparked in realization and gasped. Oh, you're that annoying red-haired brat that Oyaji'll sometimes complain about. Shanks laughed, though it was stained. He talks about me? He called you an annoying brat who was too scared to face him in person, Luffy said seriously. Shanks snorted. That sounds like something he'd say. Well, I guess we don't have to search for your family since we already know where he is. Noticing Luffy's questioning gaze, he elaborated. He's on the far side of the island. One of my Nakama told me about him a few days back. Shanks stood up, bringing Luffy with him and leading him to the infirmary where he was temporarily staying. Come on, Anchor. Let's get you to bed. One day, I'll surpass you. The brat suddenly declared as they were walking off the Red Force to go and give him back to his family. He grinned cheekily at Shanks. One day, when you visit Oyaji, I want to fight you, Shanks. I'll become really strong. Oh, Shanks fiddled with his straw hat. Is that so? His tone was almost mocking, though he already knew that the brat would become powerful, more powerful than anyone might imagine. Yes, for a 7-year-old, Shanks gave him props. He had fierce determination and a will like no other. I'm going to get a lot stronger, stronger than you. Shanks took the straw hat off his head, contemplating what he was about to do. Knowing the kid for only 2 weeks opened his eyes up to things that he didn't think possible. This brat had literally turned what he knew upside down, exactly like a certain captain that he once knew. He couldn't help but grin, thinking of when they would meet again. Are you going to remember that promise, Anchor? Yes, no doubt. Shanks hummed, flipping his hat in his hands. A teasing smile appeared on his lips. I don't think you will. Bullshit. Shanks knew he would remember. Yes, IW. Shanks cut him off by swiftly placing his signature straw hat on the boy's unruly black hair. He smiled when Luffy looked up at him, shock and confusion written on his face. His nakama were in no better condition. All of them were openly gapping at the display. Only Ben, Lucky Roo and Yasop wore calm expressions. They looked at each other, knowing smiles on their lips. This will help to remind you, Shanks continued, bending down to be eye level with the 7-year-old who he had betted on without knowing. It's my treasure, so take care of it for me. Okay. Return it when you've defeated me. This is our promise. Luffy reached up and grasped the outer rim of the hat, pulling it down onto his face with a happy smile. Yeah, our promise. Shanks flicked his nose playfully, earning a giggle from the younger. He stood up and looked over his shoulder at his nakama who were, by now, all crowed around the rail, trying to get a good look at what was happening. Oi, boys, I'm taking Anchor back to his family. Don't destroy anything while I'm gone. Aye. All of his crewmates shouted in response. Shanks picked Luffy up, letting the boy sit on his shoulders. Let's get you home now. Hey, Marco suddenly muttered, looking out on the beach with narrowed eyes. I think I see Akagami, out on the beach. Ace forced a growl down his throat. He had been a lot twitchier and more agitated since Luffy was gone. In fact, more of the crew stayed away from the fire user in fear of their lives being taken away. What does he want? We don't have time for his stupid meeting right now. Let's go see, Marco said calmly, closing his eyes to let his blue flames flicker to life under his pale skin. Soon, 2 beautiful, blue fire wings replaced his hands and he took off, Ace following closely behind. They landed on the beach a few feet in front of the Yonko, taking up defensive stances. Whitebeard didn't have time to deal with him at the moment. None of them did. Akagami. Marco greeted, a blank mask appeared over his face. Though Ace saw right through it, noticing the tense muscles and the sly. To what do we owe this pleasure? Oh, Marco, the man grinned. Join me, Kree, no. Shanks pouted for a second before the playful grin came back to his face. I believe I found something that was yours. Before either of the men had time to question, a small pale and red blob flew at them, rubber limb wrapping around their feet several times. They both stared at the boy who had been the cause of their worries for over a week now, sobbing and muttering gibberish. Ace was the first to react. Luffy, he cried out, entangling the limb and picking the boy up, pulling him into a tight embrace. He pushed the boy away for a second, staring into the boy's slightly red eyes. Where were you? Why are you with Akagami? We were so worried. Luffy rubbed his nose and eyes, trying to get the tears to go away. Sorry, he squeaked out as Ace pulled him into another hug and Marco ruffled his hair. There was this really mean kid and he stabbed me with a knife and it really hurt and he was about to kill me, but Shanks came and saved me. He hiccuped. Their doctor said I couldn't leave even though I knew that I would worry you. Sorry. Someone stabbed you? Flames danced on Ace's shoulders, his dark eyes narrowing. Marco had to put a hand on his shoulder to make sure Ace didn't run off and track down the person that hurt their little brother. Luffy nodded, looking back at Shanks. But Shanks saved me and we made a promise and he gave me his straw hat until we completed that promise. The flames flickered out and Ace sighed, shifting Luffy in his arms so he had a free hand. He ran his fingers through his hair, feeling how greasy it was. He looked Shanks in the eyes, this time with no hostile intent. Thank you, I guess. We don't know what we would have done without our little brother. Shanks laughed. He was fun to have around the ship. Never thought I'd meet a kid like him in a long time. Even Marco cracked a grin. He's pretty special, isn't he? Very special. Shanks agreed. He stretched his arms over his head, sighing in content. Well, I guess I should be going now. Don't forget our promise, okay, Anchor? I won't, the 7-year-old declared with a happy smile. Good. Shanks started to walk away, grinning even more when he heard Luffy call out, "Bye, Shanks," as loud as he could, drawing the attention of his own crew. He heard the shout of surprise, some cheers and, was that someone crying? Shanks snorted, but he was glad for the brat. He had finally returned home.